can't whistle.
You have a gavel?
I hit it already.
Oh.
Let me just call the next card and see if they come up.
Okay, we're calling the meeting back to order. We have Brianna Braun, and Tiffany Lovell after. Is that Brianna? Brianna? What's up? Oh, she got put in the talked pile. So Cindy first and then Brianna, sorry. We already bypassed you talking.
I'm Cindy. My name is Cindy Morales at 13705 North Del Mabry Highway. Those of us in the blue shirts are here to represent the Florida consumers affected by this ordinance. We have obtained over 6,000 signatures for the My Puppy, My Choice campaign. These customers want the choice to purchase the puppy of their choice from the place of their choice. As St. Petersburg's journalist Phil Amon so eloquently stated, quote, "No matter how you feel about government regulations, a better solution to this issue is for cities and counties to adopt local policies setting minimum standards for pet stores and breeders. This preserves the customer's ability to choose the animal they want while ensuring puppies are not mistreated. The state should preserve consumer choice while local governments should listen to constituents and establish standards for pet stores. Heavy-handed government overregulation, whether from the state or local government, serves no one," end quote. While we understand this is a discussion to decide if drafting an ordinance is in the best interest of your community and the animals, your next step should be meeting with the pet store owners in your community, discussing how they operate and what obligations they already have under current laws. This will get you closer to achieving what this proposal is intending to do. We support our government and very much want to believe that this council will not move forward with the proposition to ban the sale of cats and dogs at pet stores. We hope that instead you either table the discussion until the state addresses it or will consider a breeder regulation-based model that several cities, counties, and states are now opting for. Thank you so much for your consideration, unless you guys have any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brianna?
Good evening, County Commissioners. My name is Brianna Brown, and my address is 13705 North Del Mabry Highway. I do not support any ordinance that bans the sale of dogs and cats at pet stores. It is my understanding that the intent is to promote pet adoptions and eliminate puppy mills. A pet store ban will not accomplish this. I'd like to discuss today why regulation is a better animal welfare practice than an outright ban on dogs sold from breeders at pet stores. Currently, places citizens get domestic pets from include shelters, rescues, online sources, pet stores, etc. The flow charts I have provided outline the regulated and unregulated entities where they source their animals from, and their obligations under the Florida Statute 828.29. Rescues, shelters, online, and home breeders are not regulated by any state or federal legislation. The most consumer and animal protection in place to date is for pets obtained from pet stores. You have the option to further regulate pet stores existing in your city by implementing sourcing transparency, breeder standards, and annual inspections, etc., rather than deterring small business owners from enriching your city. You can set a standard that does not eliminate consumer choice, but further protects it. We have provided a packet to you included Florida Statute 828.29, as well as the Hillsborough County Ordinance currently in place. The primary purpose is to ensure consumer protection and, of course, animal welfare. It has been said that this ban would be promoting adoption to save animals' lives and would reduce the cost of the public for sheltering and euthanizing animals. Your folder contains news reports and photos taken of Florida-based rescues that in the last year have been shut down or had their dogs confiscated due to neglect. The most recent case being 4 days ago in Highland County, just a 2-hour distance from this location, a rescuer facing 72 counts of animal cruelty, over 70 animals found, 23 of which were dead, were kept in stacked up high wire cages, neglected. These people are providing dogs to the public who have been exposed to vast number of illnesses, and yet you are approving the adoption of these rescue dogs. Does this not negate your animal welfare concerns? This ordinance does not address any of the entities that are operating under these terms. Why? The ordinance, while well-intended, is unrealistic. How would banning the only regulated entity help consumers or the animals? You're not going to take away your community's desire for puppies, as intended by this ordinance. However, you can regulate entities that are providing them. By offering a highly regulated outlet, consumers can responsibly get their desired pets. This will bring you a step closer to accomplishing what the ordinance is set out to do. Adopting an ordinance like the one you are considering won't save or benefit a single consumer or animal. It doesn't address the right sources to do so. With a regulation-based model, if you would be able to engineer a bill that addresses all your concerns benefiting your citizens and the pets in your community, not just appeasing the animal rights groups. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just real briefly.
Okay, Commissioner
I don't know
Lobo.
if it was a rhetorical question.
Yep, sure.
I don't know if it was a rhetorical question or not, but I did want to answer it nonetheless in terms of why we wouldn't address something along those lines. Based on what I saw in glancing at the documents that you handed up a few moments ago, and based on what you said, the animal rescue volunteer who apparently had at least allegedly done those things, from what I understand based on that document, what you said, they're already facing dozens and dozens of criminal charges. So the reason that we wouldn't do something in this resolution or in this proposed ordinance is because there's already a law in the books that's being enforced actively that appears to be working, at least working its way through the system, that addresses that type of behavior. If it weren't in existence, I can tell you right off the bat, I would address that in a heartbeat on this commission.
Well, in my experience, no rescues or shelters are legislated, like they're not held to any federal or legislative inspections at all. So pet stores at this point are the only ones.
I'll let them address that because I think we have enough folks that it's unnecessary for me to pick up the mantle that they may have greater expertise on, but thank you.
You're welcome.
Tiffany Level, and after Tiffany, Michelle Chapman.
Good evening. Tiffany Lovell. I live at 610 South David Circle Southwest in Palm Bay. I was not intending on speaking this evening, so I don't have anything prepared. I basically, after listening, I was coming in support of the ordinance, and after listening to some of the things I've heard, I just felt it necessary to speak up as a certified professional dog trainer who sees in-home and online clients regularly. One thing that hasn't been discussed much this evening is behavioral issues. So yes, health and welfare, physical welfare of the animals is extremely important, but also the behavioral well-being, the psychological well-being, the mental stability, and these animals who come from puppy mills are not mentally stable, not well. I see tons of dogs with aggressive issues, with reactivity on leash, biting people, fearful to leave their homes, with severe separation anxiety. And I do believe that I have a bit of a unique perspective. Not only have I been a professional dog trainer for over 12 years, prior to that I worked 4 years as a veterinary assistant where I saw the unhealthy dogs coming from these situations. And my very first job at the age of 16 happened to be in a mall pet store. When I didn't know anything, I just knew I loved animals and I wanted to work closely with animals. Having worked in that setting, yes, 25 plus years ago, I saw the condition that the animals were coming in, and we had to do certain things behind the scenes to help those dogs and cats be more healthy looking, to be more adoptable, to get the most amount of money possible. So we were doing things that I don't think a 15 or 16-year-old should have been doing in order to make sure that the owners profited. And that was not at all what I intended when I wanted to work with animals. So I think this is a problem that's been going on for a very, very long time. And I love the fact that you are bringing this to the forefront, and I fully support it, and I ask that you all do as well. Thank you.
Michelle Chapman, and after Michelle, Corinne Williams.
Hi, if I may, I have a little brochure passed around.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Chapman, and I am a resident of Winter Garden, Orange County. I am here because the issue we are discussing tonight is a local issue, it's a state issue, and it's a federal issue. Puppy mill sourcing is a problem everywhere. Just to give you a bit of background, I'm the proud owner of 6 rescue dogs. Yes, I said 6. And I'm also a volunteer for Harley's Dream. Harley's Dream was founded in 2016 in memory of Harley. And if you want to see what Harley looks like, just look on my shirt. Harley was a small Chihuahua, about 6 pounds, that spent an estimated 10 years of his life living in a puppy mill in the Midwest. Harley's home for 10 years consisted of a wire cage with a wire floor. He was denied affection, socialization, and even the most basic of medical care. As a result of this horrendous neglect, his condition suffered greatly. He had a heart murmur, a fused spine, deformed toes, arthritis, a mouth of rotten teeth, and a missing eye. As you may know, puppy mills often lose one or both eyes because they are kept in the cages when they are cleaned, typically with pressure washers. When Harley went into heart failure at the puppy mill, he was thrown into a bucket and left to die. Sadly, Harley's story is not unique. As the owner of a puppy mill rescue dog, I can personally attest to the psychological and emotional abuse that these animals endure. Even in the most loving of homes, it can take years for them to feel safe and able to trust their owners. Many of the female breeders have mammary tumors that are never treated and suffer from the trauma of receiving C-sections without anesthesia. No dog deserves this life. By banning the retail sale of dogs and cats, Brevard County is taking an important step towards breaking the cycle of pet overpopulation. Establishing a pet store ban will not only help the homeless pets in our communities, it will also impact the supply and demand, which allows the cruel commercial breeding industry to exist. This is a much-needed precedent for Florida, and I hope other communities will soon follow it. As a side note on Harley, he was rescued, and he thrived for 5 years. The family that adopted him took his case on a national level and even spoke before Capitol Hill about him and the evils of the puppy mill industry. On behalf of Harley and the thousands of dogs just like him, I thank you for your compassion and consideration of this important legislation.
Thank you. Karina, or Corrine Williams? And after Corrine, we're having Donrell, is that right? Willimer?
Daniel, maybe? Maybe just kind of a funny A?
I'm Corinne Williams, 1510 Elder Street in Melbourne. I had to put some notes into my phone because I really didn't plan to talk about this. I wanted to talk about my experience with rescue. I've been a dog enthusiast for over 20 years, but hearing some of the stuff I heard tonight, I really had to go into a little more detail. This guy sounds great. He sounds like he's very, he's got a nice store possibly, but everything he said was not right. I'm an AKC breeder of merit. AKC does not license breeders. I do not have a license from AKC. And everything I'm saying is on the AKC website. You can go and check it out. I've competed with my dogs for 20 years. I've taught obedience for over 12 years as a volunteer in my local dog training club. By the way, I'm new to this area. I just moved here in October, and I was aghast at the number of stores that sell puppies. As an AKC breeder of merit, it doesn't mean much. It just means that I register my puppies with AKC. All my puppies are registered. I do health testing on all the parents. I put titles on my dogs. Not just show titles, but performance titles. Really, they don't care about much except for the show titles. But the performance titles prove that the dog can do what it was supposed to do, what it was bred to do. License, I'm getting kind of all over the place because I really didn't plan to speak like this. As far as regulating me, there's peer pressure. My parent club, the club that I belong to, that is the club of my breed, we know each other. Also, another thing I want to add is people should put more effort into buying a puppy. I probably put more effort into buying my last blender than some people do in buying a puppy. You walk into a pet store, you give them money, and you can walk out with a puppy with no thought of how you're going to take care of that puppy for 15 years. And that's why all these people do rescue. I'm a responsible breeder. I have never, ever sold a puppy, nor would I ever, to a pet store or even anybody that I haven't met. People come to my house. They have to meet me. I have to meet them. And then they wait. They wait. I've had people wait for 2 years for one of my dogs. 2 years. And you better believe when they get that puppy, they appreciate that puppy and they give it a great home. They don't just dump it. If something doesn't work out, they call me. And they can call me and I will take that dog back for any reason, if there's a health problem or whatever. I've had to take back a couple over 20 years. By the way, I never did more than 1 or possibly 2 litters a year. And I haven't had a litter now since 2010, and I'm still an AKC Breeder of Merit because of the titles that I put on my dogs.
Okay, I don't want to cut you off, but I let you go over, and your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is it Dan Rell or Daniel? Willimer?
Daniel.
Daniel? Sorry. He's going to tell us. Name and address?
I'm sorry, the pen ran out of ink when I was filling out the card.
That's okay.
Don't worry, I'm not here to give you a hard time about the water. You guys probably already know
What's
me.
your
My
name and
name's
address?
Daniel Williman. I live in
Daniel.
Carriage Park in Satellite Beach.
Great, thank you.
And this is my dog, Buford. We've had him for 10 years now. He's 10 years old. We got him in 2008,
like my
actually from the pet store in the mall over here. And about 2 years in, he started getting sick. He got pancreatitis several times in his life. He's had now pancreatitis 3 or 4 times. He's recently been diagnosed with kidney disease and idiopathic megaesophagus. It's where the esophagus swells in the throat. And we did research. My family did research into, when we went to get him, we were told this is not a puppy mill place. These are not puppy mill dogs. They don't come from puppy mills. We know that for a fact. And we did the research as to where Buford came from after a couple of years. This was 2010. We looked into where Buford came from. It was a lady named Tina Carr out of Missouri. She has a puppy's place. It's called, what was the name of this place? Let me pull it up here. Simply Puppies in Hannibal, Missouri, which got 18 pages of USDA violations. Mr. Lober, I want to thank you for bringing this to the table because the problem as I see it is that, as I believe I heard this gentleman say correctly, that he couldn't go there to check out this place, or that he doesn't go to check out the places where these puppies come from. They're too far away. I would like to see something in place where we can prevent this from happening. We need to, when people are selling puppies, they need to know what the conditions are, the breeding lineage, the history, all that stuff. Because as I'm told, this is all stuff that can happen from inbreeding. I don't know that that was the case, and to his credit, he does offer a very good after-purchase warranty and health care and stuff like that, but he didn't check this place out. That needs to be done, and we need to make sure that we know that when people are buying puppies at these places, that they're not coming from puppy mills. Nobody likes puppy mills. I love my dog dearly, and I would never give him up, even if there was 10 things wrong with him the day after we bought him. But he's had a hard life. He's had a very hard life because of this, and I don't want to see that happen again. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Nicole Capabianco, and then Pam LaSalle. hope I said that correctly.
You did. You did a great job.
Thanks.
So my name is Nicole Capobianco. I am from Vero Beach, 7065 21st Street Southwest. Totally wasn't planning on coming here and speaking, but I had to do it because I have been trying to get an ordinance passed in Indian River County. So I dealt with the same scenario back in October with this whole group of people that are here today. Not sure if you know that they're actually, some of them are children of pet store owners. They kind of all congregate together to question your judgment as to if you're doing the right thing or not, because you don't want to put a man out of business, and I understand that because I'm a small business woman and grew up in a small business family. I bought a dog from Gregory Doherty, who owns Pets Around the World, and my dog was very sick and almost died. I've spent, year to date, I think I'd say about $10,000 on her. And I'd spend every last dime that I had before I ever brought that dog back to him or brought the dog to a pound. I made the mistake of going in there. I didn't know really about pet stores like a lot of people, I think. And I'd had Great Danes in my life before, and I was at a point in my life where I was ready for another one. And it's been horrible. She's now a year and a half almost, and it's been issues since the second day that I had her. She had pneumonia, was hospitalized. I spent $5,800 on her in the first 12 days of having her. She came into her first heat in July and never came out of it, just kept cycling and cycling and cycling until we had to do an emergency spay on her. She had ovaries that had cysts on both of her ovaries. Her uterus was extremely enlarged. So if I did ever want to breed her, it'd be a reputable breeder, which I have no desire to do that, but my dog would never have had the chance to do that. Her papers were completely botched. She came from a puppy mill, an Amish puppy mill in Odin, Indiana. And as far as, I don't know, I've got so much that I could sit here and say, and time is running out, but I know firsthand that these people are not what you think they are. Not that there may be a couple good people out there, and I'm not against breeding. I'm not an animal rights activist whatsoever. I think it's for the greater good, and these animals are not taken care of. It's absolutely horrible, and there's so much corruption in this whole organization, and I witnessed it at my meeting because Mr. Doherty actually brought his veterinarian, the same veterinarian that's signing off that these dogs are in perfect health, but then mysteriously within 2 days, my dog is fighting for her life. So
Thank you. Thank you.
hopefully, I hope you guys make the right decision and think about it, because the dogs deserve it, and so does your community. Thank you.
Thank you. Pam LaSalle, and after Pam, we have Sarah Ann Conklin.
Pam LaSalle Vieira. I wish I could agree with this ordinance proposal. I think it's prohibition, not regulation. I think what we really need is regulation. I looked into this several years ago. I contacted my state reps. I contacted my state senator. I contacted the ag commissioner. And like most officials, when they don't want to deal with your request or your problem, I got crickets. So absolutely no response. It is a USDA issue through the feds also. But I will, in all honesty, say that I think I suspect that the USDA may protect the industry more than the animals sometimes. But from my personal experience, I think prohibiting a business from doing something will send that activity in other directions. And it is very difficult to legislate morality, which is really kind of the heart of what we're wanting to do here. From a personal perspective, we have all rescue dogs. And many of y'all know me personally and our backstory to all of this. But one of the dogs I wanted a purebred. I couldn't get a purebred here. We ended up driving to Virginia to get our purebred dog. That is a rescue, but you know, and with all rescues, you really know. You can look at her and you think, okay, that's what she is. But as far as health issues, our rescue dogs are not cheap. Two of the ones that we've had have been incredibly expensive, gone to vet schools for care, and we have spent thousands and thousands of dollars. So I really don't think that showing a rescue dog next to a pet store dog for health costs, because you don't always know. One of our dogs, we really think it was the pet food that has caused the problem, that there was something in the pet food that made them sick, and she got liver damage from it. But anyway, my point is this. I think you're going at it wrong. I really think you should be looking at it as a regulation issue and work with the proper authorities to get that, because we don't have regulation in this state that goes in and looks at the shelters or the groomers or the businesses that deal with animals, and I think that's what you need. I don't really think cutting out, because this is just going to stop this man. I really believe him. I think it's really going to kill his business, and those dogs will go elsewhere. You're limiting supply, you're not limiting demand, because people do not everyone wants a rescue dog. They want a purebred and a specific kind, and you don't get them. There aren't that many purebreds in the shelter. Any questions? Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Sarah Ann?
Hi, and Happy New Year, everybody. Thanks for being here. Thank you, Commissioner Lober, for bringing this forward. It's one of your first acts on this commission. I applaud you. I just want to identify myself. I live in Cocoa on South Lakemont Drive, and I'm also a foster parent for the local SPCA. I have a foster dog from the SPCA who I love dearly. Our family adopted, I have to say adopted, even though it was purchased from a pet store, a fox terrier many years ago in Titusville. I don't think this pet store continues to exist, so it's okay to talk about them. But this dog was so incredibly sad. It had spent the first 6 months of its life that we knew of in a wire cage in that pet store. My sister literally felt so sorry for it that even though she was in there looking for another kind of dog, she finally said, I have to get this dog out of this cage. So this dog came into our family. It had all kinds of behavioral issues. It took over a year for that dog to become a friendly, nice dog. That's with everybody loving on it 24/7. And I think that we have regulatory failure in this industry. As someone who's taught public administration, if you have regulations, they are only as good as the implementation and the execution of the enforcement of those regulations, and we have failure there. We have widespread failure, and given that we can't solve that problem here, I applaud Commissioner Lober for doing the one thing he can do, which is let's stop the local contribution to this problem. We can't stop everyone from buying a puppy mill dog in any pet store, but we can stop it here in Brevard County. We can be a beacon here. We can say at least where we live, we are not supporting this particular brand of cruelty to animals. And I'll say a word also about the rescue foster that I have for SPCA. Her name's Sissy. She's an elderly boxer. I never intended to have a big dog, and I certainly never intended to have a boxer, but this dog broke my heart when I saw her. on the webpage, and she had obviously been bred in very bad conditions. And she had obviously been abused and confined, and she's crippled, and she shows the signs of being bred, and she shows the signs of just having a hard and horrible life. So I just really implore you to do the thing you can do. You cannot regulate all the breeders. You cannot stop every pet store, but you can, in Brevard County, do this one thing that will stop this from happening here, and maybe you will encourage the next county to do the same thing. So I applaud you. I support this, and thank you for bringing this to the commission. Thanks.
That's all the cards we have. Yay. I love hearing from you guys, but at the same time, I know sometimes things get lost in all that discussion, and I'm glad we get a chance to bring it back and talk about it a little bit. And so, Mr. Lober, did you want to start?
Sure, if you don't mind. Let me try to get that back on. Perfect. So again, my concern, I think, I just want to kind of full circle back to where I began, is where these animals are sourced. And I'm absolutely in favor of the least restrictive measures possible that would ensure that we don't have animals sourced from puppy mills. If we had the ability to regulate either locally or even at the state level what happens in these out-of-state breeders that we've heard are the origin for a lot of these puppies, I don't think that's even been disputed. That would be great, but the problem is we don't have the ability, and we can't punt it to Tallahassee based on it being something that we're not entitled to regulate. It's simply not enforceable to regulate interstate commerce, and I can tell you in a heartbeat, that's what they would start crying, and it would not survive. And if the county attorney disagrees, I certainly would invite her to jump in and say I'm wrong if she feels that way. But she doesn't seem to, so I have concerns. I think that it's a situation that's intolerable. Obviously, I don't think that the gentleman sitting in the front is doing to the puppies in his shop what we saw in the video, but the problem is I don't think, even if he has the best intentions, which he may well, that he really has enough knowledge as to the breeders. We heard from one of the other individuals that came up to comment that really there's not much involved in having an AKC certification, and that they don't license breeders. I don't know that that's incorrect. I don't know that that's correct. But the concern is, what I do know is that there are puppy mills, that they're frequently the source for these dogs. I can tell you that we've heard from the Humane Society, from folks with the SPCA, from the Sheriff's Office, from Animal Control. These aren't fringe groups that we're dealing with. I know there were some concerns brought up about PETA. I didn't invite PETA. I didn't have any contact with PETA with respect to this. Quite frankly, I don't plan on talking to PETA unless they call me between now and when this is addressed next. But really, if the mood of the commission, so to speak, is one where it would rather see this amended to include some specific restrictions upon where pet stores can source their animals and what requirements ought to be placed upon them, I'm happy to draft something along those lines. Obviously, I think as much of a bite as we can take out of this problem is my goal. I believe that as it's written, it would certainly have a tremendous chilling impact with respect to the sources of those puppies. Now, I'm not saying every single one of those puppy or kitten sources is a puppy mill, but we know to a good degree of certainty that's where a lot of puppies and kittens come from. And I noticed that I mentioned earlier that we have a very small number of individuals from the industry in Brevard County. Now, I don't know if that's because, we have one individual who's operating by and large above board or entirely above board, and the others are concerned that they may have such blatant failings in how they're conducting business that it's not worth them subjecting themselves to scrutiny or cross-examination up here. But as I mentioned in the beginning, and I respect you folks for coming out here, I truly do, and I really mean that. And I do think the shirts are cute. I really do. But again, the bulk of the criticism that I've received prior to this, and even now, it's coming from folks that aren't constituents. They're out of county. It doesn't mean that their opinion's invalid, but it does go back to reinforce the point that I made in the beginning, that the bulk of our constituents, my constituents, your constituents, are in favor of a measure that would restrict this industry in a way that would prevent or dissuade puppy mills from existing. So, if it's something that you all will support as written, I'm happy to move that way. If that's that's not the general feeling, I don't want to waste the effort on it, and I'd rather table it and amend it to include some restrictive measures so that there are more obligations placed on individual pet stores. The only individual, and again, respectfully, that didn't want to, or that didn't think it was logistically possible, if I'm misspeaking, I apologize, to visit all of the sources of puppies was an individual that has a pet store. And I'm sorry, but we've heard even from other individuals that oppose this ordinance that I'm supporting that there are reasons to have site visits in pet stores. And I apologize if that's an increased burden, but I don't believe that if that's the direction that the Commission's inclined to go instead of supporting it as is and as written, I don't think it's an unreasonable burden, and I think it's something that certainly sends the right message, better than doing nothing and just allowing the status quo, which is, quite frankly, it's intolerable.
Commissioner Smith?
I appreciate and applaud Commissioner Lober's passion. I agree with him 100%. I think that anybody with an ounce of compassion would not support a puppy mill. But at the same time, I don't think we can throw the baby out with the bathwater. I would suggest that well, first of all, we license restaurants. If you have dinner at a restaurant and you get ptomaine, we don't want to shut all the restaurants down because some restaurant gets ptomaine. We license them and we have inspections. Why couldn't we do the same thing with pet stores? We can come up, I'm sure we could ask staff to put together some kind of a licensing regulation with restrictions, and we could debate them and we could talk about them, and because I think that would help get us where we need to be without causing a legitimate business to go out of business. If he needs to do some more research or he needs to do some more inspections, whatever we decide, I think that would, because I don't, shutting down him and 10 other puppy stores, and if 9 of them get dogs from puppy mills, that's still not going to stop puppy mills. So I think that would be a reasonable alternative to license these things and come up with restrictions that require.
If you'll just indulge me
Sure.
a second, I have a couple of questions for the sheriff, and before we go further into the discussion, maybe if that's okay, if you guys will indulge my questions. And I'll just start asking as you're walking up here. And I know I asked this already, but I think my biggest fear is, even if we went the route to where we started sticking a bunch of regulations to make sure that people, I guess, aren't purchasing from puppy mills, which I don't know how somebody who owns a puppy mill doesn't get with his neighbor who also happens to have a license and say, here, you sell these dogs to this place. And I don't know how you fix that problem. I think it's a much bigger problem than that for the Brevard County Commission. But my question to you would be, is if we put new rules in place, do you have the resources, the manpower, and the ability to manage that? I mean...
Well, Mr. Abate would make sure I got extra funds in my budget to do that.
Well, Mr. Abate doesn't approve your budget, we do.
Oh, my bad. So, to answer your question, we would make sure we could do that. The problem is, and if I could speak to a little bit of both questions there from Commissioner Smith and yours as well, the problem is we can only control what we have in Brevard County. We could go in and inspect that business. We could go in and make sure they're complying with all of the things that this commission would set forth. But that would not give us the ability to do anything regarding the conditions of the puppy mills that are being done in Ohio or Cleveland or wherever they are taking place. One of the things that hasn't been talked about here, there's 2 groups of people here tonight, and actually it's not fair. Everybody here tonight cares about animals. There's a separate group that cares about their money as well. And when you look at hobby breeders, which has come up several times tonight, most pet stores can't afford to buy from hobby breeders. They're buying the dogs at a much cheaper rate, which means they're being tended to at a much less effective measure and a less efficient manner. They're not as healthy, they're not as cared for as a hobby breeder takes care of their pets. That's why the cost difference there. So what we're actually talking about is what I said at the very beginning, and that is the health and well-being of pets. And to Commissioner Smith's point, yes, sir, this is just the tip, but the tip of the iceberg is what sucked the Titanic, and we need to make sure that we are being the tip of the spear that is going to protect these animals across the board, and hopefully others will follow and do what we're doing, because as I said at the beginning, it's the right thing to do.
Any suggestions, and this is maybe a conversation for us to have later, but any suggestions on how we broach the bigger issue with the state? I mean,
well,
as far as regulation of
yes,
the puppy
ma'am.
mills?
To that regard, I think once we have a model in place that's effective and works, we take that model to the next level. And I think the state of Florida is thirsty for it. I think you'll see some other things that are going to be coming in this legislative year and the coming years that are going to work toward a lot of different goals about the health and well-being of pets. But I think we start with kind of keeping the health and well-being important here in our area, and then using that as a model to branch out.
Commissioner Lober, do you have any questions for the sheriff? I can't tell. There's like a gazillion lights on. Or
I think they've been pressed at various times, but at this point, I'm going to defer to other folks for
Commissioner
questions.
Pritchett?
Yeah, I'm going to recommend that we just kind of rest on this right now, maybe spend some time with you and kind of tweak this a little bit, find out what we need to do to start putting a hindrance on the puppy mills without necessarily shutting down appropriate businesses. So.
Well, I know tonight is about the legislative intent of this, and so if it's the Commission's desire to move forward with that legislative intent, I will commit our resources, myself, Mr. Hellebrand, and our team to helping work on language if Commissioner Lober is open to that, to come up with something that everybody agrees. Look, all of us want businesses in our community, all of us want healthy pets in our community, but at the end of the day, sometimes you have to put one before the other to make sure we're doing the right thing. But we would definitely be receptive and eager to sit down and come up with some language that everybody might be agreeable to.
And if you find during this process that you have two items that say is a pretty divisive item up here even, you can give us at least a couple of options. I don't mean
Yes, ma'am.
completely different type of ordinance, but like maybe a couple of, okay, if we go this route, this is what this means.
Yes, ma'am. And one of the things that we would do post haste is look at other existing models that are out there.
I think Hillsborough County gave us a copy of theirs up here.
Right, and we would look at some of those and come up with something that everybody's agreeable to and has the most impact with the least effect.
And I think what we have here, and just indulge me for a second, is we have the two extremes. We have the pet store owner who may be lucky enough to know he's buying from so many different breeders. He doesn't know who he's buying from, and he doesn't stop by and visit, which to me is disturbing. I'm not saying you sell bad animals, but that's very disturbing to me. And then you have the massive political action committee that comes out that owns multiple stores and has a vested interest, but they're doing all the right things probably, but they have the means and the resources to do it. So again, I think there's somewhere in the middle. Obviously, I want to do enough to have an impact and not just sit up here and posture to be able to pass something to say, oh yeah, we care about puppies. If it doesn't have any teeth and it doesn't really stop the puppy mills or doesn't have an impact on them, then it's sort of pointless and it's sort of silly for us to enact. But
yes, ma'am. Again, I commend Commissioner Lober for bringing forward the idea, and again, I know he's passionate about animals, but I would love to see us. I try and always do this with our agency. I'd love to see us become the model that everybody else adopts. Is what I'd like to see.
Commissioner Lober.
In terms of where we're at this point, let me actually, if I may, bounce a question to Ms. Bentley. If this is approved as it's written right now, with the one exception that I mentioned at the beginning, the striking of those two words, would we be able to, between now and this coming back to the Commission, alter the phrasing in that draft ordinance such that we could take into account these concerns?
You could take into account some concerns, but you would have much more flexibility if you waited and developed the direction that you want to go. If you want to go for regulation and licensing, you would want to advertise that in your title.
Okay.
And that's not what you have right now.
Okay, my thought at this point, I don't know where other folks are, is perhaps the best thing to do is to table it for a couple meetings. We can set it out at some point in February just to allow folks ample time. Obviously, sunshine restricts me to a large degree in what I can discuss with my colleagues up here. I'll continue to work with Sheriff Ivey and Deputy Hellebrand to ensure that whatever is proposed in February, however this is modified, it's something that's enforceable and it's limited in scope as much as it possibly can be while still accomplishing the goals. I would like, though, because again, with sunshine, if I don't talk with you all now about it, we just don't have the discussion and I guess as to what might be palatable to you. I would like to know if folks up here are amenable to, and I'm thinking aloud for the moment, but to some sort of a restriction obligating those folks that are in retail pet sales to physically visit on an annual basis each and every source that they purchase puppies and kittens from, and also to ensure that those sources don't have any substantiated violations over, I don't know what a reasonable period of time would be. Does anyone know if they measure that as far as violations annually, or if it's a 5-year period annually? So we could say within the past 4 years, 3 years, what's reasonable? A year doesn't really tell you much, but 100 years is a little excessive.
I like that, Commissioner. I think we need to figure out what the, I'm sorry, what the framework would be that would be appropriate, that we're going to make sure we're kind of getting where we want to go with it. I'm still a little bit of a baby on this.
Sure, and I'm not trying to put anyone in concrete so they can't move from that position. I really want to have an idea so that I don't waste the time between meetings in working on something that has no chance of passing.
Right.
I want to make sure that folks would be okay, at least in concept, with something along those lines. And if they're not, I'd rather know now than have a surprise.
I would like to tell you that I would support regulation and licensing. I think if a legitimate business owner wants to do the legitimate thing, I think he or she should be allowed to do that. I don't think we should create such a broad brush that we're putting people out of business, because, again, I think it's been pointed out here that if we were to do something like that, we really are proliferating puppy mills, because people want their dogs. They want to know that they can order a puppy that's going to be a cocker-poodle mix or a Morkie poo or whatever that is, and they're not going to get that at an animal shelter or SPCA. They want to be able to order a dog. So I think licensing and regulation would be, in my mind, again, like we do that with restaurants, we do that with many businesses. So why shouldn't we do that? And I think what you're saying is that would send a message.
Well, what I'm actually saying is, if the puppy mill is in Ohio, I have no way to regulate that. You have no way to regulate that. They could be the worst conditions in the world, and no offense to our store owner here, but he's the one going to inspect it, and he's also the one that has a vested interest of money in it. So by doing that, you're really not creating any mechanism that's going to take care of the animals.
Right. Well, that's why I'm suggesting licensing and regulation, because we could put that in whatever regulation that we come up with.
If I'm understanding the recommendation, the only regulation we'd be putting in is that he has to visit the store or visit the puppy mill. Nothing against this gentleman, but the next store owner may not even go and may not even care what the puppy mill looks like.
So what's the answer?
The answer is, I think, embedded in the current ordinance that's before you, with a little bit of tweaking that I think we could arrive at in a very short period of time.
Well, I just want everybody to know that I'm very, very sensitive to the fact that we're talking about puppy mills that everybody hates, but we're also talking about legitimate business owners.
Sure.
And I want to be able to separate the two, because I know that you and I have talked that there are some very questionable pet stores in this county, and we don't want to enable them to continue in business because we know they're doing the wrong thing.
Right.
So how do we?
Well, again, I think we have to look deeper too at the next business that wants to open up, not just the one that's already here, but the next one that wants to open up. And again, our ultimate goal is not to harm their business. Our ultimate goal is to put the puppy mills out of business
and protect the person that wants to buy a healthy animal.
Right. And I would say that if we're going to move forward with this legislative intent, Commissioner Lober, then our team jumps on it immediately and comes up with an alternative language that everybody can agree to. And I would have no problem in sitting down with our business owner.
I think that would be a terrific idea
as well, to try and get some input from them in doing that. I will tell you that some of our greatest partners in this county and some of the greatest minds when it comes to saving the lives of animals are sitting right here, have spent their evening with you tonight because they care about animals. They're not here because of money. They're not here because of anything except most of them own 3,000 pets, and they're here because they love animals. So I would want to engage some of our partners in that conversation.
And I
as well.
appreciate you doing that with the animal ordinance changes. I mean, you sat down with the veterinarians, you sat down with the groups, you sat down with, and I got the okay from Teresa, so I knew you were good. If Teresa gave you the stamp of approval, I knew it was clean.
I mean, I don't know. Commissioner Tobias has been a little quiet over here, almost in the corner. Where are you at with things? Because quite
He's
frankly...
next. Yeah.
Oh, are you?
His
I'm
light
sorry.
was on, yeah.
Okay, I'll shut up then.
Thanks. The sheriff gave the analogy about, I think, the iceberg sinking the Titanic. That's true, but Maritime didn't decide, we're not going to sail any ships on the water anymore. What they did is they looked to come up with a better design. So I think that's probably the way. I'm going to stick here with principles. And I think it's fine that we force Mr. Jacobson to go visit every place that he gets puppies, as long as we force every gas station to travel overseas where they get their oil, and every clothing retailer to fly to China to see where it's made, and every restaurant to go to farm where their darn butter is produced. I'm not for additional licensing. We have a brilliant solution over here, and I'd like to give credit to where credit is due. I'm just jealous I didn't think of it, is Commissioner Pritchett over here, who's taking advantage of a licensing structure that is already in place. So we don't have to create an even larger bureaucracy. So as much as I appreciate Commissioner Lober's passion with this, and I greatly do appreciate it, there's no way in heck that I will ever even get anywhere near to touching something that is going to go against the very principles of free enterprise, and is going to take legal business owners, whether they be small or big, and say what you're doing and what you've done for years and years, you no longer can do. Yeah, I'm completely, utterly, totally inflexible on that one. If we want to move this forward, I'm willing to do that. However, I am willing to do that with, and I'm not saying I'll vote for this as we move forward, because I just got this and going through, but with Commissioner Pritchett's idea, I think that the structure's in place. I would certainly want to speak with Mr. Jacobson and some more small business owners, and to see if that meets their needs. But no, on this one, I, under no condition, I guess unless we regulate each and every business that way, would ever vote for anything that is going to kill free enterprise.
I'm really a little unclear there. How do you really feel?
Mr. Chairman, can I?
Sure.
Commissioner, I loved your analogy, and if you don't mind, I'll give you one back.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
You're right. They didn't stop vessels from sailing across the ocean after they violated all of the maritime laws and killed hundreds of people. But they did come back and provide regulation that protected future passengers, and I think that's what we're talking about right here. We're not trying to run him out of business. We're just trying to put in some laws, if you will, that will make sure that no pets become the victim of a disaster.
And owners.
And owners.
Because the owners suffer. Because, as we've already heard, people get these dogs that are sick and unhealthy. They're not going to give them back because they love the dog.
Right.
They're just going to spend the $10,000 we heard in one case and the $2,800 in another case. So we're protecting the owners as well.
In what sense?
In what sense, what?
I'm just trying to understand, because we heard on both sides folks have adopted dogs that have been sick and they've cost a fortune. Then we've heard folks have bought dogs that have been sick and they cost a fortune. So
we're going to protect those people from buying defective dogs.
Perfect. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I'm on the same page as you are. Thank you.
Commissioner Pritchett?
Yeah, I think we, one, need to really get a hold of our legislation because they're getting ready to go into session, and maybe they can get something stronger with this. What I did on this, Commissioner Lover, is I took yours and just added a few things to it. So if Commissioner Tobias is good, we can use this and we start tweaking off this. It's really that with just a couple other things thrown in. Then we can maybe move forward with legislative intent, trying to figure something out. I kind of like the one I put together, so.
If you want, I mean, I'm happy to continue spearheading it with Sheriff Ivey, or if you want, I'm happy to pass the mantle and let you continue spearheading it.
I think we all need to.
Yeah, the
So we
problem is
get-
that sunshine issue.
I know,
Where I'd love to work
I
with you
know.
and work with the sheriff, but I think we're going to have one of us more or less lead the charge. I'm happy to do it. If you want to do it, I'm not going to be greedy about it. I'm happy to let you do it too. But I think really we've got to have some sort of consensus in terms of whether it's me moving forward with the sheriff, and the sheriff certainly is.
Well, you know what we can do is we can give these ideas with Eden and let her work on some things and send them out to us.
That's a great idea.
And then she can work on different.
If you'd like.
That's great. I like that idea.
Yeah, and then we could come to consensus maybe in a meeting.
Just for edification, one of the first things that we would do if you're asking us to be involved, and it sounds like you
Please,
are,
sir.
is we would want to get with our partners, of course, and with our business owner and talk about what some things that we all believe can come together, be part of this ordinance, and fix the problem. You heard them stand up here today and say they despise puppy mills as much as anybody else. They want the best for the pets. So we would take that initiative to get them together, come to whomever you decide, and bring that knowledge.
Yeah, so I think at this point, unless there's some further discussion, I just table it, and then we can readdress it. In all likelihood, at some point in February. Realistically, this will never happen by the next meeting in January.
Probably not.
So probably end of February, in all likelihood.
What do you think, Sheriff? That gives you enough time to do that?
Well, Joe will be the one mainly doing it, so if he can't get it done, I'll fire him.
So what you mean to say is it's going to get done?
Yeah, it'll get
That's
done.
confident, right, Joe?
Yeah, so I can assure you that you give us a timeline, we'll meet that timeline. So you tell us when you want it back, and we'll have it back to you.
Does that sound reasonable to you, though, end of February?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Cool. So we need a motion to table?
I'd move to table it.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Lober, second by Commissioner Tobias. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you for your time.
Yes, ma'am.
And thank you,
guys very
everyone,
much.
for coming
Thank you,
out.
We should have done that at the beginning.
I know, right? Thank you, everybody, for your patience and your passion for animals.
Y'all don't want to hear about all the other exciting items on the agenda? No. Fair enough.
Item J1, Yuri.
Yes, ma'am. What we have here is that, let me give you a little bit of background. In 2013, we went out for an RFP. The contract for collection exclusive franchise agreement was awarded to Waste Management, 7-year contract, 3-year renewal under certain conditions. Waste Management recently came back and said they did not wish to pursue the 3-year renewal option. So that just gives us a contract into the year 2020. One of the things that they said several things were affecting their model of business. Number one is that the population has grown bigger than what they had expected and projected, thereby they're projecting that they have to buy additional equipment. The contract is not long enough to depreciate this equipment in the 2 years that are left in the contract. Yard waste was another issue that they brought up, unlimited yard waste. This mainly affects certain areas of the county. Other than that, traditionally we have had unlimited yard waste. So what we have here is now we got to go out for an RFP, and we're requesting permission to do so. We have several ideas in which to continue the current level of service or whatever level of service the commissioners wish to direct us to do. What we do have is also an idea of, traditionally the county has been divided into very recent two business areas. So we were wanting to give the option or put the option out there that any person that wanted to bid in the contract could go for either the north, the south, or both, or all. So we're wanting to build as much flexibility as we can into this. We are also requesting the committee to be formed of John Denenhoff, Matthew Wallace, and myself, and we would be bringing the results back to the county for the board to make the final determination as to who the contract would be awarded to. We also need a consultant. This consultant would help us during the process. The last time we did this, which in 2013, the consultant cost around $38,000 or $40,000. I'm estimating $50,000. We would need permission to do whatever budget changes we need to do with this. And pretty much any other ideas that the county wants to do as far as, or the commission wants to do as far as tweaking the level of service.
Commissioner Pritchett?
Yeah, I realize we're going to have to go out for this process, which is probably very good. I would just request if they did this, we would consider, we do twice a week pickup now, that we go to once a week. I think we'll save a little bit of cost. We're going to save on roads getting torn up, and we're going to cut our complaints in half from people getting their garbage missed. We do this in the north end and in a lot of areas, and it's adequate. So I think that should be one change we should look to make. I think it's easier on our environment, and I think overall it would be just a better thing for us to do than a twice-a-week pickup as we're moving forward. And maybe consider, I know we do special pickup on yard debris, maybe we should limit it to a couple times a year, and anything over that they would pay for that, or we might want to think about that so that everybody in the county isn't paying extra that doesn't utilize that service as much. So those are just a couple thoughts I had.
Okay, the question would be, the once-a-week collection, would you want it as an option, or you want to just to present, oh, this is what the board wants?
Maybe it's something we can just kick around with ideas when they're looking for bids, so we can kind of compare it.
Commissioner Lover?
First, I just want to say I think the composition of the committee that you proposed is great. I think you have the folks that I would want to have on there if I were to put a committee like that together. I do want to say, and again, this touches a little bit on what Commissioner Pritchett just mentioned. I don't make use, by and large, of the yard waste pickup. However, I do have a lot of constituents that view that as something that's very important to them. So if there's not a tremendous difference in cost, my strong inclination would be to include it. I'm not going to make much use of it myself, but I do know that there's some folks that feel very strongly and that have expressed that concern to my office.
There are certain areas in Florida which restrict the yard waste to 2 cubic yards or 4 cubic yards. There's always some discussion about what that entails. But, of course, 10 cubic yards, there would be no discussion whatsoever. Right. And you're right, it is basically relegated to certain areas in the county. It is not, overall, but again, that would be a decision that the board would want to do. If you want me to put another option in there about restricting it to 2 cubic yards and twice a year, a free bulk pickup for yard waste, I can do that.
May I just have a quick follow-up?
Sure.
With respect to that, my only concern, well, I shouldn't say my only concern, the concern that comes to mind at this point is how the average individual who's putting out their waste is going to know exactly what 2 versus 4 cubic yards is. I mean, is that something that's a legitimate concern, or do you think my concern is perhaps a little bit unfounded or misplaced?
We ran into that concern during the hurricanes.
Okay.
We were having waste management pick up 1 cubic, I think it was 2 hurricanes ago, 1 cubic yard or less, and there was always arguments about what 1 cubic yard was. I know what 1 cubic yard is. The average citizen doesn't.
Okay. Yeah, I see that being a source of a lot of complaints and concerns, if there's any ambiguity all on the consumer side. Thank you.
Any comments or reference on your thoughts while you're talking? Any comments or reference on your thoughts once a week versus twice a week, or are you interested?
It would have to be a profound cost savings for me to consider supporting once a week. If there is a substantial cost savings, I would consider it. But I think, I mean, even individually, I value the twice-a-week pickup. It's not necessary. If it could save a lot of money for the county, I would forego that individually, but it would have to be a substantial difference in cost.
The way I understand Commissioner Pritchard was saying was that if we present it as an option, you can see both.
I'm happy with that. Yeah, I'm absolutely happy with that. More information is never worse.
Commissioner Tobias?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is a question about the $50,000 consulting fee. Is that for the RFP, or is that for the RFP as well as looking at the actual products that come out of that RFP?
That would be for the development of the RFP as well as the evaluation of the answers coming back.
Okay. Can you help me get to that $50,000? How different would the RFP be than the one that was put out, whatever, 3 or 4, 5 or 6 years ago? Is there really a need? I'm concerned that we may not get back but one, and we spend all this money on a consultant. I realize this is a potentially $90 million project, but I'm just trying to wrap my head around what are the significant changes to
The
trash
answer-
pickup in the last couple
The
of years.
answer to that is how much options you want me to put on here. In other words, the more options I have, the more complicated it will get. On the other hand, what happened last time that we went out, we had never gone out. I'm estimating 50,000. It might be 20,000 because we already have a framework of what we did before. One of the things that we will help contain this cost, if you want to go that route, is that we have a framework. We already did an RFP before. We have the verbiage that goes with the RFP. It would have to be tweaked. At the end of the day, it would be your choice, Commissioner.
Well, I mean, we talked about twice a week versus once a week.
That's just one more column.
Yeah, I get it.
That's not a big deal.
I understand. I'm still trying to get to that $50,000. If not, I think I need to go into trash consulting.
No,
if that's the case.
The $50,000 doesn't mean that the contract is going to be put out for $50,000. I'm just going by what happened in the past and trying to bring it to the future. I'm extremely, and you can talk to any of my employees, extremely, I don't spend 2 pennies if I have to of the budget. So if I can get away with a $10,000 contract versus a $5,000 contract, I'm going to go with the cheapest contract I can find, as long as it accomplishes what I need to accomplish, which is the help in at the very least, in the evaluation of the proposals when they come in.
Yeah, my concern is, if we got into this and you only received one bid back, right, then we had spent a lot of resources creating an RFP, and then we get, we've given a contract, and now we have a consultant that we're on the hook to pay tens of thousands of dollars that is reviewing one contract.
You are not going to get, well,
Yeah.
I am 90% confident that you will receive at least 4 to 5, maybe 6 responses.
We heard the exact same thing when we had a consultant up here talk about county managers, and we got back
I do know that
one or two has been fired. Thankfully, we did not go with what the consultant had, but again, these are fees that are passed on to consumers, so that's why I'm just concerned.
Absolutely.
And I don't think you're wasting. I just have, I guess, more confidence in you to write this RFP than potentially what a consultant, would.
If you have the confidence in us, I'll just take out the whip and make them work longer hours.
Commissioner Smith?
Yuri, you're talking about 2 to 4 cubic yards. Is that per week or per year?
Per week.
Okay. Because I think the issue now is, and I've spoken to Waste Management, their concern is that they bid this contract with the idea that they were going to have a rough number of pickups. And we have an ordinance in place in the county now that requires the homeowner, if they cut the limbs down.
I'm glad you brought up that point. I had skipped over that point. Thank you, Commissioner. One of the last issues that they brought up is that landscaping contractors, they come in and talk to homeowners, and some of them are very reputable. They'll tell them, you know, it's going to cost you $200. I'm going to haul the waste away. Waste Management is not responsible for collecting it. Some of them will tell the homeowner, I'll cut it down, I'll leave it down, call Waste Management, they will pick it up. Others will give them a two-tier price and tell them, you know, it'll cost you $250 for me to take it away and $150 for Waste Management to pick it up. All you have to do is call them up and tell them you cut it down. That does exist. The problem that it happens right now is that the homeowner is responsible for it and not the contractor. So that would have to be a change in the code that the board would have to authorize me to bring back the code to them. I believe that the homeowner really relies on the contractor to tell them what's right and what's wrong. And if the contractor is giving them bad information, the homeowner is going to come up with a bad decision. And then, you know, be left with the pile if somebody has taken a picture and passed it on to code enforcement, then the homeowner is responsible for the pile while he didn't know, he or she, that that was the end result of what was going to happen. And those type of piles generally are very big piles. Those are clam truck piles. Those are not 2 cubic yards.
So we need to address that as well.
Yes, sir, if you want to tighten that up. That would be a separate thing that we can do at the same time.
I think that would be advisable because, as you said, right now the onus is on the homeowner that really doesn't know. And if presented with 2 options, pay $250 or $150, most homeowners are going to unknowingly break the law and go with $150.
Yeah, I would like to talk to planning and zoning to make sure that we take the proper path and then bring a legislative intent to the board regarding that issue.
I like that idea. So, and I'm with Commissioner Tobias. I don't know that I want to spend $50,000 for a consultant if we already have, from 2013, which was before I got here, we kind of have a blueprint, do we not? Could we just go with that blueprint?
We can, as long as you don't give me a bunch of options, but it looks like from the conversation that has occurred today, the options are going to be very little, and if that's the case, then we might not need the consultant at all.
And with regard to 1 pickup a week versus 2, I asked Waste Management about that several years ago, and I don't remember the exact number, but it wasn't very much. It was only a couple dollars a week, or maybe $3 a week difference between 2 pickups and 1 pickup. I could be wrong.
There is some savings. You got capital. I mean, that's their business, but it won't hurt to ask.
I agree.
So so the board can have all the information in front of them.
Good. Thank you.
Since there's no more lights, I have no problem with asking because I was one of the big, you know, and I still to this day think it was the greatest thing that Palm Bay did was go to once a week pickup. However, the blowback, I cannot tell you, was far and above what we expected because people that were okay with the once a week service didn't come to council or send an email or call to complain, but the people that didn't like us going to once a week service took real issue with that. And now I know they're going into negotiations because I see it on social media, and I know their contract comes up in 2022. That's the number one thing that the residents want is that twice a week service. But I also understand, and I credit Waste Management for this because I really harassed them and hassled them about the cost. I think I even dealt with the county about expansion of the landfill, the cost of fuel, the cost of, and the difference was only a few dollars, but we went to single stream recycling. We ended up, ultimately, it ends up saving the taxpayer, but it's a very hard sell when someone has 2 days a week pickup and you take a day away. I've never lived anywhere except Florida. Now I've been here for obviously a long time now, but I mean, almost 20 years, but I've never lived anywhere else where there was 2 days a week pickup. So that was new for me moving here. So, but I think that trash is a big deal to a lot of people. So I think we just have to be careful. But I am more than okay and support the idea of looking at both.
Yeah,
But it's
because
really hard. I'm telling you, people like their twice a week.
I think one of the problems in Palm Bay, I lived there for a very long time.
So you remember all that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember the twice a week and then moving over to...
We had
to
union
once a
members
week.
wearing trash cans during election cycle. I am not even joking. I won't even say which union because I would be embarrassed to be a part of that whole nonsense. But you talk about they really capitalized on that. And you remember, they were driving around town with them. You had them in people's front yards. It was the craziest thing
I
I've
would
ever
have
seen.
taken a bigger can and that might have solved my problem.
But then we had people complaining that their cans were too big for the older folks, you know. But I kept telling those people, and a lot of people don't know this about Waste Management, and maybe it's true of other trash companies, they offer, you know, a curb service for somebody who has a hard time or can't take the trash can down.
I just think
A lot of people
a
don't.
human is set in their ways, and any change is they start resisting change.
Well, and for
just by the
information
nature.
purposes, we did an impartial third-party survey after the fact because we wanted to get to the bottom of what this core issue was because it was the same, you know, dozen or so people that were the most vocal about it and the unions, of course, come election cycle. But we ran that survey and it was like 70% of people wanted us to stay with the once-a-week pickup and because the dollar difference was like $2 or $3 a month difference and they didn't want to pay more because they said they didn't use the service. So, and again, that wasn't a biased, you know, waste management survey that, because we really wanted to get, council really wanted to do the people's will. We wanted to say, okay, if this is that upsetting, we'll go back to twice a week, you know, but we discovered quite quickly that, you know, the majority of people were fine with the once a week pickup. So I'm just saying, just to be, caution the council. Maybe it's different in North County, maybe they were okay with it, but in South,
We had our time for a while, but the wear and tear on the roads.
yeah. And I don't have to tell you, yeah, we've got the same problem with roads. And Palm Bay, obviously, is all like not very developed. So you have these, we have no transfer station down south. I mean, there was significant reasons for trying to save as much as we could as far as our trash prices go. But it brings back the little memories, PTSD memories of what occurred in the south. But I'm fine. I'm okay with looking at it.
Just to make sure I understand, bring the option of twice a week versus once a week in the RFP so the board can see the results of it, and we do the RFP in-house.
If you're okay, are you comfortable with that?
If not, you'll see me back.
I was going to say, yeah, you can talk to us
And
again.
we'll be bringing it back to the board. There is one other issue I want to make sure we're real clear on as well, and that relates to the yard waste. Do you want us to look, I understand, I think Yuri said, you know, there are jurisdictions that have limitations. I think in Brevard.
In Brevard, there is no
All the
limitation.
municipalities do have unlimited yard waste.
I think. But
Yeah, or majority, we can say.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, a majority. Do you want us to look at the reduced?
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing
Yeah,
that
in
you
other words,
suggested.
look at that as an option as well, and
Yes.
let them propose that, so we bring that back.
Yeah.
And then we will also, of course, be looking, based on what I've heard, we'll be looking at a countywide, and then also offer an option for North Brevard or South Brevard only, and whatever we develop would be a single blended rate countywide ultimately, and that's how we would evaluate things.
Yeah.
Okay?
Commissioner Pritchard, to answer your question, ours is blended because it's an average of, you know, highly concentrated urbanized areas and rural areas, but when Grant Valcaria went on their own, their costs skyrocketed. I think they were paying the same, they were under us, and I believe that their cost is one of the highest ones. Yeah, $247. So yes, but they have unlimited yard waste. But their area is highly rural, so they have a lot of yard waste. When they went on their own, my yard waste complaints went down.
You have to pay their fees then.
And their complaints.
And I'd like to see it because that's one of the calls we get in our office a lot too, is yard waste. And I too want to address that issue that Commissioner Smith brought up about landscapers and all these people doing these major land clearings and leaving the waste, because most homeowners wouldn't understand that they're not responsible for that. So I don't want to see the homeowners get punished for it.
Okay, we can bring back a
Because I'll bet you
legislative
they'll
intent
hand
for
over the
that.
name of that landscaper when someone stops by and says, hey, or they get a notice. They'll tell us who it was if we can't see it on our own.
Generally, they do, and the good contractors start pointing fingers at the bad ones, but, that's... So what does the board want to do about the yard waste, the limitation on yard waste?
We're going to come back with options.
Okay, with options.
Yeah.
We'll just put 2 options in the RFP, build it in there. That won't be a problem.
And I can guarantee you we will get multiple bids on the waste, because it's big contract.
It's a huge contract. The last time we got, I think it was 5.
Well, there's the major ones, the major players, and then who couldn't do the work if they wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not going to mention names, but
No, there's small companies, there's medium-sized companies, and there's big national companies.
right. Frank, did you have something? You were going to say something.
Well, I was thinking, so since you asked me, I'll ask this and say, with the variety of options that you're now looking, which is, it could be a split of North-South County, there could be a split in several of those options because of yard waste one way or the other, or whether it's one or two. What I would like is if you give at least me the ability to look at, and I think I have it, Yuri just needs it because it wasn't currently budgeted, authority to use at least a limited amount, maybe up to 20,000 at most, to evaluate all those in an appropriate matrix, to bring someone outside to help us with that, because I think that could be rather complicated. It could get rather complicated. So with the board's indulgence as part of the motion for what we're discussing now, if we could include that, I would appreciate it.
So moved.
Commissioner Tobias?
I believe you, Yuri, but I trust Frank's frugality, and so I think that considering that I would second Commissioner Lober to $20,000 expenditure.
Are you
to
saying
create
Frank's
that.
cheap, or?
I'm saying that he is frugal, and I greatly respect that trait.
Efficient.
Yes.
Yes, I agree. So I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Okay. Item J2 is, we're requesting permission for a budget change in our budget. The budget is in the escrow. The escrow is relating to the closure of the Cocoa landfill. And during the last budget development, we had gotten an estimate around $8.5 million to do a partial closure. The budget change, or the budget process finished, we updated it, and we got around another updated engineering, about $9.7 million. The problem is also that we went out for bids, and the lowest bid came around $11.2 million. We analyzed it. I analyzed it myself, and the analysis came out that the difference was in the dirt. The contract right now is divided into 2 parts. One is a fixed cost, the other one is a variable cost. The dirt there's a certain layer of dirt that has to be put in and a certain type of dirt that has to be put in. This quantity, the engineering estimate was around 140,000 cubic yards. The contractor estimated 200,000 cubic yards. That's $2 million difference right then and there. The real figure will not be known until the contractor peels that dirt and sod away and exposes the garbage to know how much dirt there is that we can recover. At that time, change order number 1 will come along, and we expect it to decrease the contracted amount by about $1 million. But what we're asking permission is to do the budget change in order to process the contract for its original price and then do whatever field adjustments we need to do out there.
I have a card. Ms. LaSalle, is Pam still here? Oh, she left anyway. Oh, I'm sorry. All right, so
One last thing, Commissioner, with your indulgence. Monies are for escrow. The monies are in an escrow reserve. This escrow cannot be used for anything except for closure. So that's the purpose of the money that was put away. If you own a landfill, as you consume the landfill, you got to start putting money away as part of my permit requirements, as part of the state statute. And when I do closures, they regulate how the closure is done and all that. But bottom line is that we're taking closure money from the escrow and using it for its intended purpose.
Commissioner Lober?
I just want to confirm, based on our prior conversation, my understanding that this is, to your knowledge, the least expensive means of accomplishing the goal that's set out by this item. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Perfect.
It's going to be expensive no matter what you do, but yes, sir.
I'll second it.
Motion by Commissioner Pritchett, second by Commissioner Lober. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, item 3.
Good evening, Commissioners. Mary Ellen Donner, Brevard County Parks and Recreation Department. The item before you is to give us direction with regards to the EEL Selection and Management Committee members. There are 7 members who terms expired 12/31 of 2018. There are 3 options in your packet for consideration. One is to reappoint all 7 current existing members whose terms expired. The second option would be to reappoint a limited number of members and then advertise for the additional members that you choose not to reappoint. Or a third option would be to not reappoint any of them and then go out and ask for appointment replacements for which each would apply. If you choose option 2 or option 3, it would be of note that to refill positions could take up to 2 or 3 months, and the members that are currently on the board would or could stay in those positions until reappointment occurred.
Commissioner Lober?
Yeah, a few thoughts. First, I want to thank staff for putting the original appointment date on there. I do understand that with respect to the 2 individuals from August of 1990, so the better part of 30 years ago, one has served continuously since that date, and the other had some period of hiatus between that original appointment date and now. With respect to folks that have served, or at least the one individual that served uninterrupted for the better part of 3 decades, that is a concern to me, regardless of what committee it is and regardless of who the individual is. My personal thought with respect to this is I could see reappointing those folks that have been appointed within the past so many years, whether it's 5 years or 10 years. But when you start getting beyond a decade, it just seems to me to be a situation in which ideas may tend to stagnate at that point. and the infusion of some fresh individuals or some fresh minds really, I would think, could be a benefit to this or any other committee. So my personal preference, and I'm happy to listen to what other folks have to say and adjust accordingly, is to have only those folks who have been originally appointed in the past, I'll be generous, 10 years, reappointed and then advertise for the remaining positions. The other question with respect to this, and I think it's something that we ought to consider, because this is a committee that may be a little bit more difficult to fill the spots of. If you look at the bottom of the agenda item, it indicates below the length of the process to complete that one of the criteria for being appointed is having a graduate academic degree in biological or environmental sciences, and it goes on with other items. But that may be a bit much. I understand this is a committee that has a benefit or would derive a benefit from those with specialized knowledge, but I think that given the stagnation that we're seeing on that board, it may be appropriate to consider reducing that from a graduate degree to even a bachelor's degree as being sufficient. I just have grave concerns anytime we see someone there for the better part of 3 decades on the same committee.
So if I may, I will answer your one question. There was one member who had a 3-year hiatus, so instead of 29 years of service, it would be 26.
That makes it so much better.
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Tobias?
I swear I did not copy off Commissioner Lober's paper, but I chose 8 years, and I didn't want anyone serving past 8 years, so I looked at people that had served 6 or less. Of the total list there, the only folks that would be 6 or less would be Ollie Johnson and Tammy Foster. So, you know, as we move forward, I'd like to make a motion to reject the appointments of the following members on the sole basis of their tenure. On the sole basis of their tenure. Those would be Randy Parkinson, Dave Brenninger, Paul Schosmeiler, Laura Lee Thompson, and Kim Zerillo. And again, I swear I did not copy off this paper.
Telepathy.
Yes. So then there's a couple ways, because I completely, wholeheartedly agree with Commissioner Lober when it comes to the requirements. However, the requirements are set up in a manual, so we would have to have at least 2 motions to do away with that. And those motions, if we get a third, would be to temporarily waive the amendment and updating procedures contained in the EEL Land Acquisition Manual. And if we did that, we would need another motion to amend the EEL Program Land Acquisition Manual Selection and Management Committee minimum requirements by deleting Section 3, beginning with the phrase, have a graduate academic degree. So we would leave everything else in place, but take away that graduate degree. So that is, I think, exactly what Commissioner Lober said, other than just putting it in the proper motion form, which I'm sure he had ready too. So agree wholeheartedly.
Commissioner Pritchett?
Yeah, I don't mind lowering it to a bachelor's degree. That might open it up. I think we need to work on option 2, re-advertise. My guess is you're not going to have them knocking down the door again to serve on a board that's out of money. Right now, all they're doing is managing existing assets, and they're all pretty good at this. And it takes a different type of person to really enjoy this. I'm actually kind of impressed that someone has volunteered to serve on a board for 30 years. And, you know, and as we're doing this, I think we should give a great big thank you to them for their service to us. But I think option 2 would be good, see what people come in that we can look at, and then make a decision on how we're going to rearrange this, because this is all of us voting on this board. But again, there's no money left in this unless it goes back on ballot, and then we better know we got the right people here to manage these type of funds, just like the Lagoon Fund. So it's kind of tricky. So that's my recommendation, is number 2, we advertise.
Commissioner Lober?
If we do get into making those sorts of adjustments with respect to the degree requirement, I think something that we may also wish to consider is whether we look at the actual description in terms of the work encompassed or contemplated within this committee, because my understanding, based on conversations with staff about this, is that a lot of it deals with procurement of lands, and my understanding at present, certainly my position is that we should not be procuring more lands. I think that the board, certainly in majority, probably shares that sentiment. So I think that if we have to go through a process of addressing it for the degree requirement, we may want to address that at the same time as well, because if we're going through the motions and that's the sentiment of the board, we might as well do it all at once.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, the motions were an expediency thing. This can be done, my understanding is through resolution.
Oh, okay.
So if we wanted to take the last two motion, and I agree with the sentiment of Commissioner Lober, this one I did not see that ahead of time. So what I would be willing to do, or he is more than welcome to do, is create a resolution for next meeting that would encompass hopefully lowering that to whether or not you think it's a bachelor's degree, or you just take the degree requirement altogether, as well as change the description there. That would take care of the last two motions. It just wouldn't allow us to advertise, I guess, prior to passing that resolution. So it's probably cleaner to do it all. I think the county attorney's office would tell us it's probably cleaner to do it all in resolution.
Okay. Perfect.
Frank?
Were we going to 6 years or 10 years? Which one did we?
I thought that we were looking at 8 years. So what I did is I chose anyone that had served 6 or less consecutive years. Once I did that, that knocked out the 5 folks and left Ollie Johnson and Tammy Foster. So my resolution would be to reject the 5 and accept the 2 that would remain under
So
that
that's the
8-year
motion,
cap.
because I don't know that everyone is understanding that that's, are we going to have a board vote on that then?
Well, I need a second.
What
That's
about this Elizabeth Becker that appears to have been appointed August of 18? Is that, I think it may have just been a...
Commissioners, that's a seat that represents the EDC and the
okay.
TDC. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, stand corrected.
Okay, so where are we?
Can I?
Commissioner Pritchett?
I think we need to do a motion, you guys, right now, do option 2 and see if we get names coming in that want to be on the board. And then we can decide the longevity and by names that we have coming through that what'll fit, so that we have a representation of a board right now. Because if nobody signs up, we're going to have an empty board.
Yeah.
Which I know is what you like anyway. But.
No. Yeah, mine is kind of option 2, but there's 2 that meet that qualification. I don't know why we wouldn't accept, I don't know why we wouldn't accept them right now. If 2, I mean, I certainly would like to re-advertise for the other 5, but if we have 2 that meet these stringent criteria, haven't served a total of 8 years, I don't know why. I mean, I haven't looked into their background, so maybe you have a reason
That
as
sounds
to
fair.
no.
I'll second it.
You're going to have to tell me again what you just made a motion on that he seconded, because I lost you.
He seconded you.
You seconded mine. I can do that. Okay. Okay.
Okay, so just to be clear, I mean, I understand, but I want everybody up here to understand. What we're doing is we're reappointing the 2 people who just, whose terms expire in 18. Those 2 don't have to reapply, but the rest will reapply, and then we'll reassess.
Well, there are quite a few expiring in 18. I think, let's just refer to them by name. So Ollie Johnson and Tammy Foster, or Foster.
Yes. So Ollie Johnson and Tammy Foster need not reapply.
And I believe your motion be that they would be reappointed.
Yes. That's the EDC appointment, Okay, so I have a motion and a second. Motion by Commissioner Pritchett, second by Commissioner Tabaya. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just for clarity's sake, I want to pass the homework on to Commissioner Lober.
Lucky
is
me.
Is that
Fine.
okay? With sunshine.
That's fine. Sure, that's
Thanks.
fine.
All right. Item number 4, J4.
Any cards?
That would be no.
It's a shocker.
I'm really surprised.
I am too. You can thank the puppies.
Yes.
Commissioner Tobias.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our current contract with the EDC is annual, but renews automatically until 2024, if we include funding in our annual budget. So this is the only contract that this is type of annual renewal. There are no review requirements for renewal. If the board continues to blindly include funding in our budget, we will have paid out more than $14 million of general fund over 10 years without ever doing a review of whether this is the most cost-effective way to promote economic development in Brevard County. So let me go over this really quickly, what this does, and more importantly, what this does not do. And I have that basic table here. This is just giving the board a fiscal analysis. It's going to provide us with options. It's going to give the county managers time to prepare for any potential changes, and this is going to allow the board to carry out its responsibilities while not breaching the grant agreement with the EDC. Here's the important part. This is what this does not do. It does not end the agreement with the EDC. It does not limit the board's options in any way. It does not cost anything more than staff time to figure out what it would cost should we do this in-house. It does not reduce economic competitiveness. It does not expose confidential information, and it does not pull the rug from under the EDC. So after discussion, I'd like to make a motion to direct the county manager to develop an optional budget during the budget development process, which does not include funding for the current EDC. This includes estimating costs for the county to directly assume full responsibility for economic development initiatives. And that's the motion when we get there, Madam Chair.
All right, Commissioner Lober.
I just want to say you did a great job in terms of the does and does not. That's an excellent breakdown. So whoever sees the minutes down the road is likely to be happy with that. I'll tell you, I looked at this and I reread it to make sure that I understood exactly what was being requested. And I think you've done a stellar job in summarizing that. In fact, I spoke with Linda Weatherman and Dana Kilborn at the EDC office yesterday, and I told them point blank that I was going to support this evening. And the reason that I stated I was going to support this yesterday is the same reason I am going to support it today. It gives us more options. The only concern that I had at the outset with respect to this, and I've already discussed it with Mr. Abate, is whether this would be such an onerous task that it would cause him problems in his office. And as I understand it, he doesn't view it to be an overly onerous task. And as a result, my one and sole concern with respect to supporting this is a non-issue at this point. So I'm going to support it, and as you intend to move forward, I intend to second it.
Thanks.
Sure.
Commissioner Pritchett?
I fully like the observation you brought, Commissioner Tobias, that we are reviewing this every year. It shouldn't be automatically just put through. So on that, I agree. I would like the city manager to review it every year. I think that would be an advantage. I'm probably not going to vote in agreement to pulling it out of the budget because I believe we're going to come to some consensus with the EDC. I think we need them. Just the few trips I've taken alone to the Pentagon and understanding the return on investment and what kind of they're doing for the economy. I mean, I used to hate the EDC for a while. And then I started watching the economic drivers they were bringing in and the cost for the amount of dollars they're spending. And they get a lot more money in than what we're giving them. So I support the EDC. I really do. I've paid attention to them. And then I also feel good. I know that we have Commissioner Isnardi now serving on the board, the executive board. So I think I would like for her, and I know she will because she's good at this, keep an eye on what's going on and bring back recommendations and ideas also. So I'm very supportive of the county manager looking over this. It's getting late, guys. Looking over this contract, but I'm not in support of it having it coming out of the budget. I think that just is a very harsh word going out of something that I just think we're going to end up supporting. So I don't want to make that statement.
No comments, Commissioner Smith? You don't have to. I just want to make sure I don't miss you. Make sure your light's working, because I don't think
Yeah,
Frank's light is working.
My light is working. I support the EDC. When I ran back in 2014, I was asked this many times about the EDC, and I recognize what they do, and I appreciate what they do. I think they bring an awful lot of benefit to the county. As a businessman, I understand that if you make the greatest widget in the world, and you're not promoting the fact that you make the greatest widget, and you're not advertising the fact that you make the greatest widget, you're not going to sell too many widgets. So I don't care if you call it the ABC or the XYZ or the EDC. We need somebody promoting what we do here and what we have, because I think bringing jobs and bringing businesses here creates stability and wealth. When you stop doing that, you start going backwards. And all you have to do is look at companies like Sears that they cornered the market. Woolworths, it's before your time, but they cornered the market. But they got lazy, and they felt like advertising wasn't that important because they were at the top of their food chain. And once you stop advertising, once you stop promoting, you start going backwards. And we're competing with 66 other counties here in the state of Florida. And if you've gone to some of these places like the symposium in Colorado Springs and the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., you know that there's an awful lot of people in this state and in this world that want what we have. So we have to be pushing constantly to keep that competitive edge that we have. So I think that the $1.4 million that we give them is a real bargain. And I know going back to when I was in college, I don't remember much about college, but I do remember taking an advertising course. And that professor told us point blank that advertising is the hardest thing that any business spends money on, because you can't see a direct correlation between how much you spend and what you get back. And I can tell you, having been in business, that's true, because you see thousands of dollars going out a week and you wonder if it's really worth it, because you can't really come up with a direct correlation with, well, I brought in this much business this week, would it have come in anyway? So it's really hard to sell yourself on the idea that this is worthwhile. But I can tell you, having done it for 40 plus years, there's no substitute for promotion. So I'm 100% in favor of the EDC and what they do.
Commissioner Tobias, is that a new light?
Thank you. I appreciate economic development, and I appreciate the work that the EDC does on our behalf. What I'm looking to do with this is just to see if the function, I think advertising is very important for Brevard County. You're absolutely correct. I'm sure a bulk of the other 66 counties are advertising what they have. However, all this does is give us an analysis if we were to handle the advertising features that the EDC handles, if we were to handle that in-house. If we can get the same return for less than the $1.4 million, that may be something we need to look at. Heck, I don't know how this could come out. This may come out that it would require Frank to hire such a large staff that it would be $2 million. And then we go back and say, goodness gracious, we are getting a good return. I have no idea what the response is, but this will at least give us an indication of what it would, another option, what it would cost in-house. Whether it comes back at $2 million or whether it comes back at $500,000, that then would be presented to the board, and then we could make the determination from there one way to go. This does not, again, end any of our contractual relationship with the EDC. It just gives us a little bit more information, so when we move forward, we can make more informed decisions.
Commissioner Lober?
And I think some of what was just touched on, I touched on at the EDC yesterday when I spoke with Linda and Dana. Specifically, I don't know what's going to come from Mr. Abate's report with respect to this. I don't know whether it's going to be something that we can logistically even accommodate if we wanted to at the same cost level. And I think having that information It may be beneficial for the EDC. It may be detrimental to the EDC. I don't know. I'd like to know. I think that we have a fiduciary duty to our constituents to ensure that we're doing everything we reasonably can to spend the money effectively, and we may be spending the money effectively, but putting myself in a position where I don't want to consider a potential alternative, it doesn't leave me feeling warm and fuzzy inside. And again, we may come across a situation where instead of having an apples to apples, well, it's 1.4 some odd billion with EDC and it's X amount in-house. For all I know, we could hear back from Mr. Abate, these are issues that are precluding me from accomplishing what you set out in terms of giving you an apples to apples, where it's just not possible to quantify these particular factors. And in terms of the EDC's concerns, you know, I said to them yesterday, I said, if we don't have an apples to apples, I said it's not something that I anticipate is going to result in the death knell of the EDC. If we do have an apples to apples, it's either going to be good for the EDC or bad for the EDC. And quite frankly, I have not the foggiest idea. And if someone asked me to bet, I wouldn't have any preference whatsoever or any inclination whatsoever at this point as to which way it's going to pan out. I don't know that this is going to be a bad thing for them. Quite frankly, if we do the research, which again, I don't believe based on my conversations with Mr. Abate, that it's going to cause him significant trouble in the office or be an overly burdensome process. I don't know that it's not potentially going to benefit them in the end. So I'm just curious in finding out what the options are, and depending on what transpires and what we're presented with, either leaving the status quo as is, if that appears to be the most beneficial, or potentially considering some alternative.
Okay. Commissioner Pritchett?
Yeah, real quick. As a compromise, I'm totally in favor of not just doing an automatic renewal, but letting the city manager, I think we should be doing this yearly, looking it over and deciding on the contract. I'm not in favor of pulling it out of the budget. I think that speaks something very strong I'm not willing to do. If he comes back and says, guys, I can get this done for $50, I mean, you know, we'll listen to that and make the changes. But, you know, that's something we need to pull later if we don't like what the contract's looking like, or the county manager comes with something different. Well, let me tell you, guys, I have watched this board in action. I've been on trips when we went to the Pentagon. I was blown away because I went with a group of people. It was a lot of work. We walked right into the Secretary of the Air Force office. We walked into all the brigadier generals and all the generals, and they were speaking to Linda like they were best friends. I couldn't believe this asset that we had there, and they're giving her direction, and every one of them said, because you're here, we're paying attention, and we're working on getting you military spending. It blew me away, and it really sold me more than you know.
And they weren't body doubles?
No.
Okay.
So the Secretary of the Air Force, she sat down with us. She said, our new mission statement is space is a warfighting domain, and we've picked your coast. These are the things we need you to do. Start getting ready for us to be able to move there with our families. Part of them was, I'm sorry, I'm going down a rabbit trail. But I think that we're getting an incredible bargain. I think Linda Weatherman is unbelievably gifted at what she does. The asset that we have in her, it's phenomenal. I've seen her. But again, I think it's just good government that we are having this reviewed every year, and it's not an automatic renewal. But I'm not going to agree to pulling it out of the budget. I think it speaks a very hard word going forward, and I do support them, and I don't want that word going out from me.
Just a quick follow-up, if I may.
Okay.
With respect to that, do you have some alternate proposal or alternate motion that you'd like to put forth? Because I'd like to have the option.
I think you got a motion second on the board, so I can't do it yet.
But were you to propose one?
I would make a motion that the contract would be reviewed by the county manager before it's just automatically renewed, and that Commissioner Isnardi is going to be on this board, and that it's not something that's automatically just signed every year, and that we're able to have alternatives if something comes up.
But would that motion that you intend to make, would that direct staff to come up with those alternatives starting now?
You look so sleepy, Frank.
I'm just trying to listen to make sure I know what I'm going to
I would have to know that staff's capable of doing that. I mean, you've got an asset right now that really knows what they're doing. So you're going to have to find another asset that you think is going to be able to know that same type of work. I think we're getting an incredible return on the pennies we're investing. But I don't know. We're going to have to look that through with if there's something else out there. I don't know if there's anything else out there. Everybody wants what we have as far as a local EDC, as far as statewide. And I mean, and I'm telling you, I've watched, I'm smoking what I'm selling. I've
Right.
seen it in action up there, and I've been really impressed with the professionalism and the response that I saw by our local EDC. And again, I told you, I didn't like them in the beginning, and it took me a while to really pay attention and to really start to get to where I liked what they were doing. And I'm not going to give them a rubber stamp on everything. I want to pay attention all the time as we're moving forward.
Thank you.
And see, and I'm conflicted on this because I see what Commissioner Tobias is doing. He's trying to save us money, but I do not know, and I know Commissioner Tobias, and I know his staff, and I know you would come with a packet of raw data, and we don't have that here. And I'm not saying that your intentions aren't pure. What I'm saying is I don't know how you compare a private entity with a governmental one. I don't know how you take a private organization that does economic development, whether you like them or not, whether you want to replace them or not, whether you think it's a bad idea to use a private, or whether you dislike Linda Weatherman. I really don't care. But I don't know how growing a government department and having a bunch of government employees trying to manage economic development, I'll tell you, most businesses won't talk to the government when they're trying to cut a deal. And it's unfortunate that that's the case, but I'm telling you, I'm not going to point fingers, but I've visited one or two, areas, and I can tell you, economic development government employees aren't exactly the most motivated, because what's the motivation? They've got a job, they're getting their high salary because it's usually pretty generous, and they're only going to be accountable to the manager they work for. Now, I know Frank works his people pretty hard, respectfully, Frank. I know you work your guys pretty hard, but I don't consider you to be an expert on economic development. I mean, I don't believe that government should function in that private sector. Again, I'd be the first to say if we can do it cheaper, smarter, better, fine. But I don't know what you compare that to. I don't know how you compare a governmental employee and a government function as opposed to the private sector.
I think you struck on a
Would you let me jump?
point.
And again, I'm not even opposed to the idea. You know me, I'm right on board with you every time when we talk about saving money, but I don't know how you compare the two. I mean, I'm sure Frank could provide a nice spreadsheet and give us the cost on a couple of employees, and he would have to create either another slot or another department for one of his existing assistant county managers to have to take over and manage, which they've not done. I'm sure they've not managed an economic development. I'm sure that's not a stretch to be able to say that. And so now we have oversight by an added workload to somebody else who has to manage a brand new department. Again, I'm not opposed to it, but I am opposed to growing government. I am opposed to creating more, taking something out of the private sector and bringing it in-house if we don't have to do that. And if you dislike the job of the EDC, then I beg of you, make your case, then we go with somebody else. But as it stands right now, I'm not prepared to make that. I'm okay with voting on them every year. I think that it's too big of a contract not to, as far as the budget goes, and we can review it and decide right then and there if they're providing. And I mean, they got us over $500,000 for the EOC. That's something. I had our representative call us and ask and talk to me about the CPT funding that they've been up there, begging for on our county's behalf, because we have a need in the workforce that high-speed manufacturers, high-tech manufacturers can't even fill. I mean, they're begging for employees. So I know that they do a little more, and I'm not here to pitch for them, because I've had my bumps and bruises and yelling matches with the EDC, and I've skinned them up here, and in the past. However, I don't think that we need to bring something in-house if we don't have to, unless you can show me a fair and honest, true comparison, and I don't know how you do that.
May.
Commissioner Tobias is next.
No, sorry, I was punting to Vice Chairman Lober first.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Just my thoughts on it, and I apologize if it's at all repetitive. I promise I'm not trying to be this late at night, but my thoughts are, obviously, I've not dealt with Mr. Abate for as long as anyone else sitting up here has, but in the dealings that I've had with him, I'm confident that either he'll accomplish the task, or if he comes across some issue that's precluding him from doing that, that he'll come back and let us know, look, these are the problems that are preventing me from making an apples-to-apples comparison. This isn't where it's that we set him out with a task, and if he has to accomplish it under pain of death, I'm confident that either he'll accomplish it or he won't. And if he won't, I'm sure he's going to come back and say to us, look, I attempted to do it. This is what I tried to do. These were the roadblocks, or these were the hurdles that I came across that were either insurmountable or that were logistically impractical to get beyond. And it's something where I would defer to him, because I share your concerns. I don't know how you compare apples to apples from a government to a private entity that has some government funding. I don't know how one would go about doing that. It is perplexing to me. I would not want to have the job where Mr. Abate, but I spoke with him, and again, it doesn't seem to be something that is, at least at the outset, based on that conversation, something that strikes anyone as so logistically impossible for him to accomplish that it's not worth trying.
Okay, Commissioner Tabaya.
Thank you, and I understand your approach, Madam Chair. The question is whether we take the approach and we look at the flaws one way or another that the county manager comes up with, or we just blindly don't compare it to anything. Nothing. That, next year it's 1.6 million and 2 million the year after that. At some point, there's got to be some break where we say all we want to do is a basic cost comparison. That's all this is. Can we do this in-house? The economic, the head of economic development in Brevard County right now is at the end of this dais up here. That is Frank Abate's job in our charter right now. So we have a leader already up here. I just want to see whether or not we can do that at a lower cost. And like I said, we may find out that it may be $3 million to do this in-house, and we need to stick with the current contract that we have. But as far as growing government, if we can do it in-house for a third of the cost and get the same results for an outside contract, I don't see that as growing government. I see that as shrinking government by total expenditures. But this is all conjecture, and will be conjecture unless we get a fair and accurate comparison. And all this is asking is for the county manager to provide us with that information. What we do with that information will be a decision of the board come budget time. I just am asking for more information is all, Madam Chair.
Can I ask you a question, Frank, real fast? I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I know you can do a cost comparison on what it would take for you to bring economic development in-house, but do you think you'll be able to do a fair cost analysis on what the county can provide versus what the private sector could? Or like the value of their contract? Like, because, maybe the issue is maybe the contract cost isn't correct, or maybe that needs to be adjusted, or, I don't know how you do that. I've looked at over 12 different ways, and I looked at other large municipalities and areas and counties, and they don't have it in-house. They call it, they'll throw their name in the title to make it almost appear to be, but a lot of EDOs are not in-house. I mean, for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, and I will tell you that I'd be the first to tell you that, I understand and I know what the ordinance is, and I think I work well with the EDC staff when they bring any items on the items that they're working on. Currently, outside of what I do directly with EDC staff when they contact me on a variety of the things that they're working on, we utilize Mr. Denninghoff currently works with both Myra and the North Brevard Economic Development Zone when we started, and he has the oversight over those two areas that deal with redevelopment and also economic development in the north end of the county. Outside of that, I do use a special projects coordinator who works in a variety of other areas to help with very limited aspects of monitoring agreements that the EDC, works to put before the board, that the board considers, that we then monitor those contracts, make sure we get the reports that they're supposed to give us, et cetera. But outside of that, our expertise currently, which is something that's reflected in there, is something we'd have to look at, is, I would say, rather limited in terms of what we have, either myself or current staff and their ability. We, of course, we will work, whatever the board's decision on how we move this forward, we'll do the best that we can with it. But it's not an area that we have current resources in. And quite honestly, one of the first tasks that we're going to have when we have our smaller internal staff meetings is going to be how do we go about, carrying out the directive if the board chooses to, to approve this agenda item. How do, senior staff and I will figure out how to do it and how to give the board the best information that we're capable of giving you. And that's really the only commitment I can make. I can't make one to say, what EDC does on a day-to-day basis, all the contacts they have, et cetera. We don't have any similar internal resources to be able to do that. So we'll be starting by scratch, but we'll bring the best information back to the board that we can. And what we would do is look at what's happening in other areas, what they're doing, and what we've done previously organizationally. And then it'll be up to the board to decide, what path you want to move forward. I see this strictly as this is a budget option, and this is how we would try to staff it. We are going to have, quite honestly, you talked about economic. You talked about, public-private partnerships. Well, one of our issues would be, when you talk about salaries, et cetera, and who's doing what and who has what expertise, what are we able to bring in within the current, our competitive pay scale and what we have within this organization compared to what the EDC or whatever public-private entity was performing this work under contract. Those are two different, considerations. That's something we're going to have to look at. So I don't know what the outcome would be. All I can promise is that if you decide to ask us to move forward in this area, we would do the best that we could with your understanding that our internal expertise in this area is rather limited, so we'd have to be building that.
Commissioner Pritchett?
Yeah, I'm just listening to this and thinking through it, and I think we're taking the few things we have that's working and working well, and right now we're just messing with it. I mean, I know we've been through this a few years ago. We didn't have anything coming in. If we didn't have the group we have together working it with the different departments, Mr. Denninghoff, I think you're a great guy, but I don't see you as the go-getter out there trying to bring in jobs and companies. So we have some groups that do it. They have the personalities to do it. If we didn't have the EDC in place, guys, we wouldn't have Blue Origin, we wouldn't have OneWeb, we wouldn't have the Embraer. And you know what? If the EDC starts sitting on their tush and they quit bringing things in and we don't start seeing a return on the investment, let's do something big with it then. But right now it's working, and I want to call the motion because I want to make a motion just to have the contract reviewed, but I am not going to vote to tear apart things that are working right now that we have, and I don't think this is a whole lot of money for the return on investment that we've gotten from this entity. So I may call the motion, ma'am.
All right. Did you have a motion out there already?
I think they made a motion to approve this.
Okay.
And I think we have a second as well.
Yes. Okay, so there's a motion to approve this agenda item as is. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Nay.
I'd like to make a motion, Chairwoman, to have the county manager review this contract and that it wouldn't just be an automatic renewal, so that he would do a review on it and then come back with recommendations.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Pritchett, second by Commissioner Lober.
Madam Chair?
I'm going to call you. Commissioner Tabaj? Go ahead.
Commissioner Pritchett, while he is doing that review, could part of that review look at what the potential cost would be to do it another way?
Yeah, sir, I don't mind. I just don't want to pull this out of the budget.
No, my motion didn't pull it out of the budget, but
I think
I'm
it did
more-
in here, it was coming out of the budget.
No.
But if he can do that, if he comes up with an idea, he's got a eureka idea, but I'm not in favor of him necessarily assigning Mr. Denning off to do it in-house. I mean, you know,
And this would-
unless they've got something hidden I don't know about. Anytime we get another idea that we think is going to work better than the one we have, I'm okay. But I'm not in favor of tearing down something that is working, just where I'm at, sir. So it's
Okay,
late, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I just want to be clear on the motion. This would give this would give the county manager the ability to do a cost analysis, I guess, on other alternatives.
Well, I hope he's doing that all the time.
I'm sure he is, but this contract is, you understand, is not set up this one. This contract automatically renews
Right,
each and every year.
I agree with your concept on that, and I'm really glad you brought that we shouldn't have an automatic renewing
I
contract.
brought it up last year, and
An automatic renewing?
I absolutely did.
Oh, well, we
It
went
went down
through
with
it.
a thud.
You have put this through us so much for every year, so you're really good at bringing that up. But I am looking forward to seeing their budget and seeing the return on the investments that are coming through from their budgets, like I always look forward to seeing. But Commissioner Tabaya, I honestly, anytime that we have our county manager that thinks he can find something better or different, I'm always open to hearing that.
Perfect. Thank you yes, I'm great. Thank you for clarifying that motion.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right. Public comments. I don't have any cards. Nobody handed in a card, correct?
Name I didn't see.
Not missing anybody? Nobody wants to speak? No, I'm just
You
kidding.
can start calling on them.
I'm good. We're going to go to board reports. Mr. Abate?
No report.
Ms. Bentley?
No report.
Commissioner Pritchett?
No report?
Commissioner Lober?
Quick report. I wanted to run by the commission, just my intention, just to make sure no one has any objection to it. It's not anything that requires a formal motion by any means. There is, as you're well aware, a search for a new director of TDC to replace our departed director. Currently, Mr. Abate is heading the interview committee. He is the one who will make the recommendation to the commission with respect to who to appoint or who to select, pardon me, to fill that spot. There are two other individuals on that particular selection committee. They will not be making the actual recommendation to the commission. However, one of those individuals was a TDC member and is no longer a TDC member. As the board's liaison to TDC and as someone who's also sitting on the commission here, I would like to sit in on those interviews just to be able to be better apprised as to what's going on. Before, it would have been an impossibility based on sunshine with the other individual having been a member of TDC at the time. But at this point, since he's no longer a member of TDC, I intend and I would like to sit in on those proceedings, provided that no one has an objection that they'd like to articulate at this point.
If I may just add a couple.
Please.
What happened is when we started this process, and I want just one point of clarification as well, is I had gone to the former chair of the TDC and asked for their, obviously, participation in the screening process, not as a formal voting committee or anything of that nature, but just to provide some input from the TDC's perspective. So the TDC made a recommendation for the two individuals to participate, along with myself and Mr. Liesenfeld, who's over the TDC and tourism. And so the four of us will be involved in interviews next week with the candidates, and Commissioner Lober has taken over as the TDC chair.
Not as the chair.
Oh,
Mr.
not as the
Abate.
chair.
No,
Oh,
sir.
I'm sorry. On the TDC. Well, and he made the inquiry of me could he participate as an observer? And so that's why this discussion is coming here, to see, he will not be, I don't believe, actively participating in the interviews, or would be if the board was good with that. But we thought it was something that was important that it be brought in front of the board, because this is not a public sunshine meeting. This is an interview, and then ultimately is the responsibility of the county manager to. And so let me tell you what's happening. On Monday and Tuesday, we're having individual interviews with 5 people. I will take the input from the people that are involved in those interviews. Then I'll make a decision with the recruiting agency and tell them these are the 2 or 3 candidates that on the 23rd, we will be inviting all the commissioners to meet with whoever those finalists are, as well as members of the TDC. And you may remember, for those of you who were here a few years ago, that's what we did when we selected the former TDC director. So that's the process that we are moving forward on, and that's, I just want to, let me...
I appreciate it.
Yeah, sure.
It's just a little odd because we have 2 individuals who are involved with TDC, neither of whom are still, to my understanding, involved in any respect with TDC, at least not directly or as committee appointees. And I don't intend to ask anything. I'd appreciate the latitude to ask a question if there's something burning that comes to me during the process of observing the interview, but I really don't have any prepared list of questions or really any question in mind that I plan on asking those folks. I really just want to be there to better apprise myself, and by extension to be able to relay back to the County Commission and also to TDC what it is that I observed. I trust Mr. Abate to handle the interviews probably better than I would handle them, so I really don't intend to be involved any more than perhaps asking a question or 2 if there's something that's really pressing in mind.
Commissioner Pritchett?
Yeah, I think if this was sunshine, that'd be a little bit better, because I almost wouldn't mind going and sitting on it myself to hear. So then I actually asked him about it myself, and he looked at me funny last week. He just kind of looked at me, and I thought, that's usually Frank, let me know, knock it off, Rita. So the thought on that is, since it's not sunshine, you just said that right now, and you're doing this interview, are we getting in your way while you're trying to do this? Is there a reason we can't all just show up and listen? Why is that like this in Eden? How does that work if we wanted to sit in on that interview? Why is it so that it's not open to sunshine when they're interviewing?
Because it's not a public meeting.
Okay.
But the item is then going to come to the board, so I mean, if you remained absolutely silent and there was no interaction between the board members, you could do it, but I mean, the odds of you not having a question and not having interaction,
So
it would put you in a dangerous
spot.
spot.
It'd be okay if we didn't say nothing.
Technically, yes.
Okay. Okay.
And I'm happy to do that, but again, my reason for not having sought to address this earlier was because we did have someone who's currently serving on the TDC, and having been appointed to the TDC, I didn't want a chance exactly that happening, where it would certainly have the potential appearance of impropriety having the 2 of us in the same room, especially in a context that's not public in nature. So, again, I'm willing to do whatever I have to do. I'd prefer to have the ability to ask something, but if it's really important to you that you sit in, I'm happy to.
No, I don't mind going. I'm almost concerned that we would ask questions while they're doing the interview, too, without all of us having the ability to jump in at that time, because they're going to narrow down the candidates. So
I see what you mean.
that makes it a little tough, too. So we've never had this before, Commissioner Lober, so...
What would you like, Mr. Abate?
We do have the public meetings the following week, and that really, the intent was that so that those candidates can meet the all the board members, and you can all provide me input before I come back and make a recommendation between, who it is that, what your impressions are of those final couple of candidates are. If you ask me what my, ultimately what would be the easiest route, obviously if you have enough confidence in me moving forward with interviewing with the original panel and then bringing a recommendation forward, I don't want to create any kind of in one commissioner, if there was a second there, it's almost... Sure. And to be honest with you, I don't want to create... It was very intentional, because if it was a committee that was voting and all the committee, everyone who's sitting there that was invited is participating just to provide their input and insight. If I did it differently and we were voting on it, well, first of all, it's degrading the county manager's authority for hiring a director, and that's why we're not doing it. But that's really why it's not a sunshine meeting, because I retained all the I am retaining the responsibility and will be responsible for whoever I bring back to the board in terms of who those final 2 or 3 candidates might be. But I will be listening to the input. So I guess that's my take on it.
Okay, sir, then I'll just give it to you then.
I guess my thought at this point, the only lingering concern that I have is not as a commission member, but as someone on the TDC. If we originally had a couple of folks who were on the TDC, and the TDC back in the day decided that they wanted TDC input on this, and they put 2 individuals who, as I understand it, were both then on the TDC onto this, even if they don't have an ability to vote on the eventual selection. Even if it's not me, I'd rather have someone from the TDC. We could put, I'd propose Tim Deritani, someone who's currently sitting on the TDC, on that. So if it's more appropriate not to have it be me, that's fine, but I'd like to see TDC represented in the form of someone that's actively on TDC, whether it's me or whether it's someone else.
What's the benefit for that, other than with them doing the selection committee like that?
And I
Help me with
trust
that.
Mr. Abate,
Okay.
because again, the selection committee, the reason the selection committee is what the selection committee is because 2 of those 3 individuals were then involved in TDC. So it's almost something that's become obsolete insofar as the other 2 members are concerned. Quite frankly, if Mr. Abate wanted to handle it solo, I'd be more comfortable with that than having 2 individuals who were appointed on the basis of their involvement with TDC, neither of whom is still involved with TDC. So if the commission's more comfortable with that, I would be more than happy saying to Mr. Abate, if you want to handle it completely solo, then I trust your abilities, and I have no concerns whatsoever in your doing that. Is that amenable to the commission?
Yeah, I'm trying, the reason I got myself into this pickle, so to speak, is because I was trying to give deference to what's a very important decision for this board, for me as the county manager, for the TDC, and what's involved in tourism, and ultimately the community. So, it worked before. That's how we did it. We invited people when the former county manager was county manager. It was myself, him, and 2 representatives that the TDC had chosen. Actually, one of the members of the 2 individuals that we currently have was a former, as you've indicated, member of the TDC until the end of December. So he was on the TDC when we did the initial screening. The second person that the TDC recommended and asked be on the panel actually was a former TDC member. He wasn't a TDC member at the time that otherwise that would have become a sunshine issue if the 2 of them were there.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I think we're just really getting into the weeds with this one.
Submit to whatever's appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with it. I would just say if you're not a selection member, I may just not ask questions.
Okay.
Commissioner
Yeah.
Tabaya?
That's fine.
I don't want to, the charter's pretty clear, this is a decision of the county manager.
Right.
And I never say anything bad about Frank, but I'm going to real quickly. This is a bozo decision to allow anyone else in there, whether they're currently sitting on the TDC, whether they have sat in the past. This is your decision. And if you decide to have some input from other people, I trust you. It's not a decision I would make, but I understand that this is completely, solely your decision. I would certainly hope that the other 2 people or the other 20 people in the room understand that, because as one of the folks that has to, I think we approve your decision. I understand as a member that this is your decision. I certainly don't want to, as a board member, and break charter. and try to cause any concerns as you make a decision, such an important decision. So I think you probably went a little too far, helping giving other people more say than what they probably deserve. But again, that's your decision, and I support you on that.
May I follow up with that?
Sure, why not?
Just briefly, would you be comfortable handling it completely solo if that's what the commission wants you to do?
I will, ultimately, that is, as you said, my decision. I will continue to do that with Mr. Liesenfeld, who's over the tourism.
Is that acceptable to everyone? Because to me, that seems to be a good way to do it. Rather,
I don't know that I trust Mr. Liesenfeld.
So if that's the consensus, I'd ask that we go about it that way. So it really is just you and then other members of the staff as you deem appropriate.
Yeah, I'll handle it.
I mean, ultimately, they're going to meet the board members anyway, so.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, rather than having folks who used to be on TDC being there, the very presence of which may cause there to be perhaps some alteration in how things go, or really what people are thinking in terms of who they have to appeal to, I think it's cleaner just to have you there.
I appreciate the input. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
In the interest of time, no.
Commissioner Tabaya.
No report, Madam Chair.
I do. Actually, you're going to hear me talk for a second. Kurt Smith. Why do I forget you every time, Commissioner? You're too quiet. That's the problem. Everybody else is yakking, and you're just sitting over there.
No report.
Okay, thank you. So, I don't know why I miss you. Just like I said, you're too quiet. All right, so this is an issue that I was going to bring to Commission last meeting. Actually, me and Eden have been working on this. I should say my initiative, but Eden has been working on this for me. Not that it's been a lot of work, but she's been handling this item and looking up some of the legality of it since October, November, pretty much November-ish, yeah, maybe even October. And in the interest of, the holidays and a new commissioner, and Commissioner Lober had a couple things on there. I just don't want to waste any more time with this. We dealt with an issue that could have gone to ballot with the Children's Services Council, and we voted down the option, and Commissioner Lober wasn't here, but I had the benefit of talking to Commissioner Lober before he was elected. So that was a smart move on my part, so he would at least have some background on this, because I knew I was going to bring this to the board. I would like, at this point, I wanted to repeal the ordinance, because this board has been in place since 1990, and what it has become is a political animal, and it's and I think I've demonstrated I have no problem saying no, political fallout or otherwise, because I fundamentally disagree with the concept of this tax, this ad valorem tax that is unaccounted, it's not managed by an elected body, that goes on forever, if at least 12 years if you go by the statute, which you can also waive in the referendum language, which it can go on in perpetuity, for a maximum millage rate that an unelected body, that independent district selects. I've seen these boards get insanely grown in size and employees and in rental space and in just the management of money. You can scrutinize it all you like, but what ends up happening is that the elected body that put this organization in place, or this board in place, has no oversight over how they spend their money. So what I would like to do to take the politics out of it, because I fundamentally and philosophically disagree with this indirect taxation without representation, and I think it hurts homeowners, and I think it unfairly burdens, people on fixed incomes, and unfairly burdens, single families, by putting it on our tax bill. So I wanted to repeal this ordinance, and I didn't know whether or not I would need a legislative intent. I found out later that I would need legislative intent to ask to repeal it. I didn't think I did, because it was just a repeal of an existing ordinance. But, again, I'm not afraid of the political fallout. I had no problem saying no to them when they were all in the room here, and the threats to my office about me, whether I run for office or not, getting reelected the next time around, it doesn't bother me either way. I think this is fundamentally not the job of government. It's scary on its face, and it's $8 million of tax dollars that we have no say over, that people paying the money probably won't even benefit from where it's distributed. So that's the very short explanation. However, I know you guys are familiar with this issue, so the only thing is, I'm not asking you obviously to vote to repeal it now, because that would be silly. but I didn't want to throw anything last minute on the agenda to ask for legislative intent. I figured we're all pretty much up on this issue. I know Commissioner Pritchett sat on the board for a year. I know we talked about it at length. I know I spoke about it with you. I think it was September, or maybe it was August, I don't even know, maybe even July, I don't even know about it, but to kind of fill you in, because I knew that this, once it failed for even a second to go to referendum here, I knew that I would be bringing this issue up, because a board in place since 1990 that's done nothing. I mean, even some of the board members, slots weren't even filled, and people were just sitting on there, but with no official reappointment, and it's just become so political. You know, they actually ran a poll and changed the language the second time the poll, because they didn't like the numbers of the first poll. So how can we manipulate the electorate with the second round of language and pay $17,000 to pull 400 people and do a joke of an analysis? I'm sorry, but I don't want to. That's what I don't want to happen. So avoiding that altogether, I think if people want to donate to charity, they're going to do it on their own, and I don't think that they should be forced into that, especially without oversight. I think what bothers me the most. So the only thing that I would be asking this commission for, and I'm sorry if I'm rambling, but this issue really bothers me as far as on its face. So the only thing I'm asking for is a waiver of policy that the board would waiver legislative intent. So I could put this on the January 22nd meeting. It's already complete now. I mean, I'm sure there would probably not even be a problem to send it to commission now. I mean,
If you direct us to advertise it, we can get it on.
I make a motion to advertise it and put it on the agenda.
Second.
And the waiver of legislative intent? Okay. Commissioner Toya.
Thank you, and I appreciate expediency. My question is this: what's the problem with going through the proper procedure? If they don't have the ability to institute any type of tax, I just think that we are giving the folks, we're taking away the folks, and it's clear that you have your mind made up, and in all honesty, I have my mind made up too.
And I can answer the question you're about to ask me.
But I don't know why we wouldn't give them the opportunity to contact us and, give them their 3 minutes up here.
Oh, and they will get that the next meeting when it's an agendized item. And one thing that I've learned through this process, going through our charter, is they cannot collect signatures. It's against our charter. You cannot collect signatures for a tax. So that takes that option for them off the table. The only way, in effect, that they can bring this issue forward is to trick the electorate with the second ballot language that gave them the favorable numbers, is basically what it was, and to get a weak commission.
Sorry, and I don't mean to interrupt. I'm not arguing against the merits of
It was still
where you're going.
advertised. The meeting was still advertised, the notices will go out, it'll be a part of the packet. It's not late, it's just the legislative intent factor that.
But what's the expediency? What's the reason that we're foregoing policy? If there's no way they can get that ballot on the ballot language in the next 2 weeks, this is what this does.
Right,
is
because I
truncate it by
don't
2
want
weeks.
them to expend any more debt. Because by abolishing, and this is what I didn't want to do about getting in the weeds too far, because this will be part of the repeal and the ordinance that gets put in place, we have to assume their debt. So if they have another meeting and they decide to do another $18,000 or $50,000.
That's very important. I didn't understand
Right.
that. Can you tell me a little bit about? I did not know that. Can you tell me a
And
little
I
bit
would have
about how much
walked
debt
this-
they have? I'm sorry.
The only debt that we were able to find, they have from September 17th, they had $22,000 in the bank because they got a lot of private money coming in to push the agenda, right? So they've spent like $17,000 and then $2,000 for a consultant out of Tallahassee, another $2,000, which to me is just mind-blowing. We start digging into who the consultant is, you'll get where I'm getting at. And I didn't make any friends with that statement, by the way. The only obligation, the only contract that I'm aware of that they have, and I was on the board for a bit, and Commissioner Pritchett could probably validate this as well. They used to have United Way as an administrative body that services the board and handles the minutes and stuff. They went with the Space Coast Health Foundation for $100 a month, and the contract goes through 2020 until December 31st of 2020. So they have a 2-year, $2,400 obligation that I'm aware of.
Can I ask a question to staff?
Sure.
I don't. My intent is never to take away anyone's right to, redress. Is there a way that we could handle both of this by potentially limiting their ability to expend any future funds or to obligate themselves in any more debt?
We have no
with
control over that board. They're an independent district.
Yeah, they're an independent district, and I don't...
Sorry, I
that's
didn't mean to.
You've got an ordinance that created them pursuant to the statute, and that's a little...
Your mic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It follows the statute, so just off the cuff, I don't think so. But it does provide for the repeal in the statute.
Very valid reason. Thank you for explaining.
And again, I would have, you know how I feel about people putting things on the agenda at the last minute. This wasn't to, bamboozle anybody. This is going to come before the commission. Nothing's done in the dark. Everyone knows sort of how I feel about it. And again, since I've been working on this with Eden, I'm sure word's gotten out anyway. However, I don't want to delay it any longer than I have to, and I want it to be, and it'll be complete. You'll have information in plenty of time, and they'll have plenty of time to plead their case. What are you laughing at? What did I miss? I missed the joke?
No.
No,
Okay.
I think it was when you said that you're sure word's gotten out after having spoken with Ms. Bentley.
No.
I think that's what I was laughing at.
No. Only because I've asked her a lot of questions about it. No. Miss Bentley is an honorable lady. I didn't even see. I'm glad I asked what was so funny, but of course, Miss Bentley's not going to say anything to anybody. But I'm saying we've been working on this for so long and talking to different people, and we tried to. I knew the work on it wasn't going to be extensive. It's just I kept telling Eden, okay, let's make sure that we're reading this charter correctly. Let's make sure that we've got this worded correctly. Let's make sure we're covering all of our bases. And so it hasn't been an exorbitant amount of work. But that is the primary reason why the legislative intent is in our policy. You know that, right? I asked that question, too. I said, why do we have legislative intent for everything if we're going to bring a complete package to the board? So there's public notice, there's advertising. And I guess, years ago, you had crazy board members that would put staff through the ringer and legal through the ringer and have them prepare these crazy things that would never pass. So we were expending a lot of staff time. So it's not done for any other, this policy is not for any other reason than that. So the waiver of it's not an unusual or inappropriate thing.
I would ask you, watch what you say. Many times my proposals have been cut off at the knees at legislative intent. So,
well, that's you. Everybody expects that. All right, so I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right. Anything else? Nobody wants to hear themselves talk some more? All right, with that, I'll adjourn. Thanks.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.